Muqaddimah Chapter 3 Part 6 42. How it happens that access to the ruler becomes restricted. 686 in the dynasty. Such restriction becomes important when the dynasty grows senile. It should be known that at the beginning, as we have mentioned before, 687 the dynasty is remote from royal aspirations. It needs group feeling through which its power and domination can materialize, and the desert attitude is characteristic of group feeling. A dynasty based upon religion is remote from royal aspirations. In one based exclusively upon superior, political, power, the desert attitude, through which superiority is achieved, likewise is remote from royal aspirations and ways. Now, if a dynasty at the beginning of its rule is a Bedouin one, the ruler possesses austerity and the desert attitude. He is close to the people and easily accessible. Then, when his power is firmly established, he comes to claim all the glory for himself. He needs to keep away from the people and to remain aloof with his friends, in order to be able to talk with them about his special, private, affairs, since his following has by then become large. Therefore, he seeks to keep away from the common people as much as possible. He employs someone at his door to admit, only, those of his friends and of the people of the dynasty whom he cannot avoid, and to prevent people, in general, from having access to him. That person is stationed at the ruler's door to exercise his function. Then, when royal authority flourishes and royal ways and aspirations make their appearance, the ruler adopts royal character qualities. They are strange, peculiar qualities. They must be carefully handled in the proper way by those who are in contact with them. Persons in contact with rulers often do not know about these qualities and may do something that rulers do not like. He may become displeased with them and get into the mood of punishing them. Thus, knowledge of manners to be used in intercourse with rulers became the sole property of their special friends. The rulers kept all except their intimates from meeting them at all times, so as to protect themselves against noticing anything that might displease them and in order to protect the people against exposing themselves to punishment. Thus, rulers introduced another entrance restriction even more selective than the first. The first concerns special friends of the ruler and prevents everyone else's admission. The second restriction concerns the meetings with those friends of the rulers, and prevents admission of everyone else from among the common people. The first entrance restriction is in existence at the beginning of a dynasty, as we have said. It originated in the days of Muawiyah and Abd al-Malik and the Umayyad caliphs. The person in charge of entrance restrictions was called by them doorkeeper, hajib, a word properly derived from the same root as the word entrance restriction. Then, the Abbasid dynasty made its appearance. Its famous luxury and power came into being, and the royal qualities reached their proper perfection in it. This called for the second entrance restriction. The name of doorkeeper, hajib, was restricted to it. The court of the caliphs contained two buildings to house their retinue, one for the special group and another for the common people. This is stated in Abbasid history. In the later dynasties, a third entrance restriction came into being. It was even more selective than the two previous ones. This occurred at the period when the attempt was made to seclude the ruler. It resulted from the fact that the first step taken by the men of the dynasty and intimates of the ruler who set up the young princes and attempted to gain control over them, was to keep the inner circle and the special friends of the young rulers farther away from him. The person who attempted to gain control over the young ruler suggested to him that it would diminish respect for him and would destroy the rules of etiquette if these men were to be in contact with him. His purpose was to keep the young ruler from meeting anybody else and see to it that he would become so used to him that he would not want to replace him with anybody else until he securely dominated him. An entrance restriction such as the third was obviously required under these circumstances. As a rule, it comes into existence only in the later years of a dynasty, as we have mentioned before in connection with the seclusion of the ruler 688. It indicates the senility and decline of the dynasty. It is one of the things that the members of dynasties are afraid of. Those who support the dynasty will naturally attempt such a thing when the dynasty reaches senility and later-born members of the ruling family lose control. Human beings love very much to gain control over royal authority, 689, especially when the soil is prepared and all the requirements and symptoms are there. God has the power to execute his commands. 690. 43. The division of one dynasty into two. It should be known that the first, perceptible, consequence of a dynasty's senility is that it splits. This is because, when royal authority comes into its own and achieves the utmost luxury and prosperity, and when the ruler controls all the glory and has it all for himself, he is too proud to let anyone share in it. As far as possible, he eliminates all claims in this direction by destroying those of his relatives who are possible candidates for his position and whom he suspects. Those who participate with the ruler in this activity often have fears for their own safety, and take refuge in remote parts of the realm. People who are in the same situation as they of running a risk 691 and becoming suspect, join them there and gather around them. At that time, the authority of the dynasty has already begun to shrink and to withdraw from the remote parts of the realm. Thus, the refugee who is related to the dynasty gains control there. His power grows continually, while the authority of the dynasty shrinks. Eventually he becomes, or almost becomes, an equal partner in the dynasty. This may be observed in the Arab Muslim dynasty. Its power was great and concentrated, its authority far-flung, and the group feeling of the Banu Abd Manaf was one and supreme over all the Madar. Therefore, no dissension made itself felt over the whole period of the Arab Muslim dynasty, except for the disturbances caused by the Kharijites, who were willing to die for their heresy. That, however, had nothing to do with royal authority and political leadership, and they were not successful, because they were up against a strong group feeling. Then, the Umayyads lost control, and the Abbasids took over. The Arab dynasty had, by then, achieved the utmost superiority and luxury, and was beginning to shrink. At that time, Abdar Rahman Iyad Dakhil took refuge in Spain, the most remote region of the Muslim dynasty. He founded a realm there and severed it from the Abbasid cause. Thus, he made two dynasties out of one. Then, Idris took refuge in the Maghrib and seceded and seized power there. His son and successor commanded the Araba, the Maghala, and the Zainata Berbers, and took possession of both the Maghribs, Morocco and Algeria. Later on, the Abbasid dynasty shrank more and more. The Aqlabids were stirred up to resist the Abbasids. Then, the Shia, the Ubaidid Fatimids, seceded. The Qudama and the Sinhaja supported them, and they took possession of Afriqiya and the Maghrib, and then conquered Egypt, Syria, and the Hijaz. They defeated the Idrisids and divided the Abbasid dynasty into two more, so that the Arab Abbasid dynasty now consisted of three independent dynasties, the Abbasids at the center and base of the Arab world and at the source of Islam, the Umayyads, who had renewed their old royal authority and caliphate of the East in Spain, and the Ubaidid Fatimids in Afriqiya, Egypt, Syria, and the Hijaz. These dynasties continued to exist until their destruction was imminent or complete. In the same way, the Abbasid dynasty also split into other dynasties. There were the Hamdanids and their successors, the Banu Hukail, in the Jazira and Mosul. There were the Tulunids and their successors, the Banu Tughshar, Ikshidids, in Egypt and Syria. In the remote east, there were the Samianides in Transoxania and Khorasan, and the Alawids, Zadis, among the Daylam and in Tabaristan. This, finally, led to Daylam domination of Furs and the two Iraqs, including Baghdad and the Caliphs. Then, there came the Seljuks. They took possession of all that area. Later on, their dynasty, too, split after having flourished, as is known from their history. The same thing may also be observed of the Sinhaja dynasty in the Maghrib and Afriqiya. When it reached its zenith in the days of Badis b. al-Mansur, 692 Badis' uncle Hamid revolted against him and cut off the Maghrib provinces between Mount Taurus and Tlemcen and the Maloya, Malwiya river, and took them for himself. He founded Alcala 693 in the mountain of the Qudama near Misila, Al-Masila. He settled there and took possession of their center Ashir on Mount Tidari. He thus founded another realm split off from that of the family of Badis. The family of Badis remained in Al-Qayrawan and environs. This remained this way, until the power of both of them was completely destroyed. The same was the case with the Almohad dynasty. When the shadow it cast began to shrink, the Hafsids revolted in Afriqiya. They made themselves independent there and founded their own realm for their descendants in that region. Their power flourished and reached the limit, but then, one of their descendants, the Emir Abu Zakaria Yahya, the son of Sultan Abu Ishaq Ibrahim, the fourth Hafsid Caliph, seceded in the western provinces and founded a new realm in Bougie and Constantine and environs. He passed it on to his children. Abu Zakaria and his children, thus split the dynasty in two. Then, his children, took possession of the capital in Tunis. Later on the realm was again divided, among their descendants, and then they regained full power. The process of splitting may lead to the formation of more than 2 or 3 dynasties that are not controlled by members of the original ruling family. This was the case with the Reyes de Taifas in Spain and with the non-Arab rulers in the east. It also was the case in the Sinhaja, Zirid, realm in Afriqiya. In the later years of the Sinhaja dynasty, every castle in Afriqiya was in the possession of an independent rebel, as we shall mention 694. The same was the case with the Jirid and the Zab in Afriqiya shortly before the present time, as we shall also mention 695. This is the case with every dynasty. Inevitably, luxury, ease, and a decrease in the extent of its power cause it to be affected by the symptoms of senility. Then, members of the ruling family or people of the dynasty who have gained control divide it among themselves, and numerous dynasties come into existence where there had been one. God inherits the earth and whomever is upon it. 44. Once senility has come upon a dynasty, it cannot be made to disappear. We have already cited the symptoms and causes of senility. 1 by 1696 we have explained that it is natural for the causes of senility to affect the dynasty. All of them are natural in a dynasty. If, then, senility is something natural in the life of the dynasty, it must come about in the same way natural things come about, exactly as senility affects the temper of living beings. Senility is a chronic disease that cannot be cured or made to disappear because it is something natural, and natural things do not change. Many a politically conscious person among the people of the dynasty becomes alert to it and notices the symptoms and causes of senility that have affected his dynasty. He considers it possible to make that senility disappear. Therefore, he takes it upon himself to repair the dynasty and relieve its temper of senility. He supposes that senility resulted from shortcomings or negligence on the part of former people of the dynasty. This is not so. These things are natural to the dynasty. Customs, that have developed in the dynasty, prevent him from repairing it. Customs are like a second nature. A person who, for instance, has seen his father and the older members of his family wear silk and brocade and use gold ornaments for weapons and mounts and be inaccessible to the people in their salons and at prayer, will not be able to diverge from the customs of his forebears in this respect. He will not be able to use coarse dress and apparel and mingle with the people. Custom would prevent him from doing that, and expose him if he were to do it. Were he to do it, he would be accused of craziness and insanity for his brusque disregard of custom. There is the danger that it would have bad consequences for his government. One might contrast this with the disregard for custom and opposition to it shown by the prophets. However, the prophets had divine support and celestial help. Group feeling has often disappeared, at the time the dynasty grows senile, and pomp has taken the place it occupied in the souls of men. Now, when in addition to the weakening of group feeling, pomp, too, is discontinued, the subjects grow audacious vis-a-vis the dynasty, because the presumption of pomp remains 697. Therefore, the dynasty shields itself by holding on to pomp as much as possible, until everything is finished. At the end of a dynasty, there often also appears some show of power that gives the impression that the senility of the dynasty has been made to disappear. It lights up brilliantly just before it is extinguished, like a burning wick, the flame of which leaps up brilliantly a moment before it goes out, giving the impression it is just starting to burn, when in fact it is going out. This should be considered, and one should not disregard the wise planning that God employs in having His creation follow its course toward the destiny He has determined for it. Each term has a book. 698. 45. How disintegration befalls dynasties. It should be known that any royal authority must be built upon two foundations. The first is might and group feeling, which finds its expression in soldiers. The second is money, which supports the soldiers and provides the whole structure needed by royal authority. Disintegration befalls the dynasty at these two foundations. We shall mention first the disintegration that comes about through might and group feeling, and then, we shall come back and discuss the one that comes about through money and taxation. It should be known that, as we have stated, the dynasty can be founded and established only with the help of group feeling. 699. There must be a major group feeling uniting all the group feelings subordinate to it. This major group feeling is the family and tribal group feeling peculiar to the ruler. When the natural luxury of royal authority makes its appearance in the dynasty, and when the people who share in the group feeling of the dynasty are humiliated, the first to be humiliated are the members of the ruler's family and his relatives who share with him in the royal name. They are much more humiliated than anyone else. Moreover, luxury has a greater hold on them than on anyone else, because they have a share in royal authority, power, and superiority. Thus, two agents of destruction surround them, luxury and force. The use of force eventually leads to their being killed. They become sick at heart. 700. When they see the ruler firmly established in royal authority, his envy of them then changes to fear for his royal authority. Therefore, he starts to kill and humiliate them and to deprive them of the prosperity and luxury to which they had become in large measure accustomed. They perish, and become few in number. 701. The group feeling that the ruler had through them is destroyed. That group feeling was the major group feeling, which united all the other groups and subordinated them to itself. It dissolves and its grip weakens. Its place is taken by the inner circle of clients and followers who enjoy the favors and benefactions of the ruler. A new group feeling is derived from them. However, this new group feeling does not have anything like the powerful grip of the other group feeling, because it lacks direct and close blood relationships. We have mentioned before that the importance and strength of a group feeling results from close and direct blood relationships. 702. Because God made it that way. The ruler thus isolates himself from his family and helpers, those who have natural affection for him. This, in turn, is sensed by the people of other groups. Very naturally, they become audacious vis-a-vis the ruler and his inner circle. Therefore, the ruler destroys them and persecutes and kills them, one after the other. The later people of the dynasty follow the tradition of the former in that respect. In addition, they are exposed to the detrimental effect of luxury that we have mentioned before. Thus, destruction comes upon them through luxury and through being killed. Eventually, they no longer have the coloring of their group feeling. They forget the affection and strength that used to go with it. They become hirelings for the military protection of the dynasty. They thus become few in number. As a consequence, the militia settled in the remote and frontier regions becomes numerically weak. This, then, emboldens the subjects in the remote regions to abandon the cause of the dynasty there. Rebels who are members of the ruling family and other types of rebels go out to these remote regions. They hope that under these circumstances, they will be able to reach their goal by obtaining a following among the inhabitants of the remote regions of the realm. They hope that they will be secure from capture by the government, militia. This process keeps on, and the authority of the ruling dynasty continues gradually to shrink until the rebels reach places extremely close to the center of the dynasty. The dynasty then often splits into 2 or 3 dynasties, depending on its original strength. As we have stated, 703 people who do not share in the group feeling of the dynasty take charge of its affairs. Though they obey the people who do share in the group feeling of the dynasty, and accept their acknowledged superiority. This may be exemplified by the Arab Muslim dynasty. At the beginning it reached as far as Spain, India, and China. The Umayyads had complete control of all the Arabs through the group feeling of Abd Manaf. It was even possible for Sulayman b. Abd al-Malik in Damascus to order the killing of Abd al-Aziz b. Musa b. Nasir in Córdoba. He was killed, and Sulayman's order was not disobeyed. 704 Then, luxury came to the Umayyads, and their group feeling was wiped out. The Umayyads were destroyed, and the Abbasids made their appearance. They curbed 705 the Hashemites. They killed all the Alids, descendants of Abu Talib, and exiled them. In consequence, the group feeling of Abd Manaf dissolved and was wiped out. The Arabs grew audacious vis-a-vis the Abbasids. People in the remote regions of the realm, such as the Aqlabids in Afriqiya and the inhabitants of Spain and others, gained control over them, and the dynasty split. Then, the Idrisids seceded in the Maghrib. The Berbers supported them, in obedience to their group feeling. Also, they were secure from capture by the soldiers or militiamen of the dynasty. Men with a cause, for which they make propaganda, eventually secede. They gain control over border areas and remote regions. There, they are able to make propaganda for their cause and achieve royal authority. As a result, the dynasty splits. As the dynasty shrinks more and more, this process often continues until the center is reached. The inner circle, thereafter, weakens, because luxury undermines it. It perishes and dissolves. The whole divided dynasty weakens. Occasionally, it lingers on long after that. The dynasty can dispense with group feeling now, because it has colored the souls of its subject people with the habit of subservience and submission for so many long years that no one alive can think back to its beginning and origin. They cannot think of anything except being submissive to the ruler. Therefore, he can dispense with group strength. In order to establish his power, hired soldiers and mercenaries are sufficient. The submissiveness generally found in the human soul helps in this respect. Should anyone think of disobedience or secession, which hardly ever happens, the great mass would disapprove of him and oppose him. Thus, he would not be able to attempt such a thing, even if he should try very hard. In this situation, the dynasty is often more secure than ever, as far as rebels and rivals are concerned, because the coloring of submissiveness and subservience is firmly established. Individuals would scarcely admit to themselves the least thought of opposition, and the idea of straying from obedience would not enter anybody's mind. The dynasty, therefore, is safer than ever, so far as the trouble and destruction that comes from groups and tribes are concerned. The dynasty may continue in this condition, but its substance dwindles, like natural heat in a body that lacks nourishment. Eventually, the dynasty reaches its destined time. Each term has a book, 706, and each dynasty has an end. God determines night and day. 707. As for the disintegration that comes through money, it should be known that at the beginning the dynasty has a desert attitude, as was mentioned before. 708. It has the qualities of kindness to subjects, planned moderation in expenditures, and respect for other people's property. It avoids onerous taxation and the display of cunning or shrewdness in the collection of money and the accounting, required, from officials. Nothing at this time calls for extravagant expenditures. Therefore, the dynasty does not need much money. Later comes domination and expansion. Royal authority flourishes. This calls for luxury. Luxury causes increased spending. The expenditures of the ruler, and of the people of the dynasty in general, grow. This tendency spreads to the urban population. It calls for increases in soldiers' allowances and in the salaries of the people of the dynasty. 709 Extravagant expenditures mount. It spreads to the subjects, because people follow the religion, ways, and customs of the dynasty. 710 The ruler, then, must impose duties on articles sold in the markets, in order to improve his revenues. He does so, because he sees the luxury of the urban population testifying to their prosperity, and because he needs the money for the expenditures of his government and the salaries of his soldiers. Habits of luxury, then, further increase. The customs duties no longer pay for them. The dynasty, by this time, is flourishing in its power and its forceful hold over the subjects under its control. Its hand reaches out to seize some of the property of the subjects, either through customs duties, or through commercial transactions, or, in some cases, merely by hostile acts directed against property holdings, on some pretext or even with none. At this stage, the soldiers have already grown bold against the dynasty, because it has become weak and senile as far as its group feeling is concerned. The dynasty expects that from them, and attempts to remedy and smooth over the situation through generous allowances and much spending for the soldiers. It cannot get around that. At this stage, the tax collectors in the dynasty have acquired much wealth, because vast revenues are in their hands and their position has widened in importance for this reason. Suspicions of having appropriated tax money, therefore, attach to them. It becomes common for one tax collector to denounce another, because of their mutual jealousy and envy. One after another is deprived of his money by confiscation and torture. 711 Eventually, their wealth is gone, and they are ruined. The dynasty loses the pomp and magnificence it had possessed through them. After their prosperity is destroyed, the dynasty goes farther afield and approaches its other wealthy subjects. At this stage, feebleness has already afflicted its former might. The dynasty has become too weak to retain its power and forceful hold. The policy of the ruler, at this time, is to handle matters diplomatically by spending money. He considers this more advantageous than the sword, which is of little use. His need for money grows beyond what is needed for expenditures and soldiers' salaries. He never gets enough. Senility affects the dynasty more and more. The people of other regions grow bold against it. At each of these stages, the strength of the dynasty crumbles. Eventually, it reaches complete ruin. It is open to domination by any aggressor. Anyone who wants to attack it can take it away from those who support it. If this does not occur, it will continue to dwindle and finally disappear. 712, like the wick of a lamp when the oil is exhausted, and it goes out. God owns all things and governs the whole creation. There is no God but Him. 46. The authority of the dynasty at first expands to its limit and then is narrowed down in successive stages, until the dynasty dissolves and disappears. 713. Above, in the third chapter of this Muqaddimah, 714 in the chapter on the caliphate and royal authority, we stated that each dynasty has its specific share of provinces and districts and no more. 715, its expansion, depends. 716 on the distribution of the dynasty's group, strength, for the military protection of its territory and regions. Wherever its numbers go, their advance, eventually, comes to a stop at what is called the border region. This surrounds the dynasty on all sides like a belt. Its farthest extension may coincide with the original belt of authority of the preceding dynasty. Or, it may be still wider, if the numerical strength of the new group is greater than that of the preceding dynasty. All this takes place while the dynasty has the characteristics of desert life and rude courage. Subsequently, power and superiority come into their own. Bounties and salaries become abundant as a result of improved revenues. Luxury and sedentary culture abound. New generations grow up accustomed to this situation. At this time, the character of the militia softens, and they lose their toughness. This makes them cowards and lazy fellows. They are caught up in the effeminacy 717 of sedentary culture. It causes them to shed the characteristics of courage and manliness. They give up the desert attitude and desert toughness and seek power through assiduous competition for leadership. This causes some of them to kill others. The ruler prevents them from doing that, by killing their great men and destroying their leaders. Thus, emirs and great men no longer exist, and the number of followers and subordinates grows. This blunts the sharp edges of the dynasty and decreases its strength. The first element of disintegration afflicts the dynasty, that which comes through the soldiers and militia, as has been mentioned 718. This is paralleled by extravagance in expenditures. The people of the dynasty suffer from the pomp of power and limitless ostentation as they compete with each other in matters of food, clothing, large palaces, good weapons, and the horses in their stables. 719 At this time, the income of the dynasty is too small to pay for such expenditures. And thus the second element of disintegration afflicts the dynasty, that which comes through money and taxation. Weakness and destruction are the results of these two elements of disintegration. The leaders of the dynasty often compete with each other. They quarrel, and are too weak to stand up and defend themselves against rivals and neighbors. The people of the border and remote regions often sense the weakness of the dynasty at their backs, and they show their strength. They eventually gain independent control over the districts in their possession. The ruler is too weak to force them back on the right path. Thus, the authority of the dynasty becomes narrower than it had been at the beginning. The administration of the dynasty, 720, restricts itself to a smaller area. Eventually, the same weakness, laziness with regard to group strength, and the shortage of money and revenue that had come about in the first, larger, area also comes about in the second, smaller, area. The 721 person in charge of the dynasty now undertakes to change the norms the dynasty had adopted as its policy with regard to soldiers, money, and administrative functions. 722 The purpose is to have norms suitable for balancing the budget, satisfying the militia, safeguarding the administrative districts, distributing the tax revenue for the soldiers' salaries in the proper manner, and readjusting the new conditions to those that had existed at the beginning of the dynasty. However, evil happenings can still be expected from every quarter. At this later stage, what had happened before in the first stage happens again. The ruler now considers the same measures that the first ruler had considered, and applies the old yardstick to the new conditions of the dynasty. He intends to repel the evil consequences of disintegration, 723, which reappears at every stage and affects every part of the realm until the area of the dynasty is again narrower than it had been before, and what had happened before happens again. Each of the persons who changes the previous norms of the dynasty is in a way the builder of a new dynasty and the founder of a new realm. However, the dynasty is eventually destroyed. The nations around it push on to gain superiority over it. They then found a new dynasty of their own. And thus befalls what God has destined to befall. This may be exemplified by the Muslim dynasty. Through its conquests and victories over foreign nations, its authority expanded. Its militia then increased, and the numerical strength of the militia grew as the result of the bounties and salaries granted to the soldiers. Eventually, the power of the Umayyads was destroyed. The Abbasids gained the upper hand. Luxury, then, increased. Sedentary culture emerged, and disintegration made its appearance. The creation of the Marwanid, Umayyad Spanish, and Alid, Idrisid, dynasties cut down the authority of the Abbasids in Spain and the Maghrib. These two border regions were cut off from Abbasid authority. Then, dissension arose among the sons of Ar-Rashid. Alid propagandists appeared in every region, and, Alid, dynasties were founded. Then, after the death of al-Mutawakkil, the emirs gained control over the caliphs and kept them in seclusion. Provincial governors in the outlying regions became independent, and the land tax from there did not come in any longer. Luxury, however, still increased. Al-Mutated appeared. He changed the norms of the dynasty and adopted another policy. 724 He gave the outlying regions, over which the governors had won control, to them as fiefs. Thus, for instance, the Samanids were given Transoxania, the Tahirids the Iraq and Khorasan, the Safarids Western India, Sindh, and Furs, the Tulunids Egypt, and the Aklabids Afriqiyat. Then, the power of the Arabs was broken up. The non-Arabs achieved superiority. The Buyids and the Daylam gained control of the Muslim dynasty. They kept the caliphs in seclusion. The Samanids remained in control of Transoxania. The Fatimids 725 pushed out of the Maghrib into Egypt and Syria and gained possession of those countries. Then arose the dynasty of the Seljuk Turks. The Seljuks gained domination over the Muslim Empire. They kept the caliphs in seclusion, until their dynasties were destroyed. From the time of an-Nasir 726 on, the caliphs were in control of an area smaller than the ring around the moon, namely, the Arab Iraq up to Isfahan, Furs, and Al-Bahrain. For some time, the dynasty continued in that manner, until the power of the caliphs was destroyed by Hulagu b. Tulay b. Dushi Khan, the ruler of the Tatars and Mongols. They defeated the Seljuks and took possession of the part of the Muslim empire that had been theirs. Thus, the authority of the dynasty, at each stage, becomes successively narrower than it had been at the beginning. This process continues, stage by stage, until the dynasty is destroyed. The fact can be exemplified by examination of any dynasty, large or small. This is how God proceeds with dynasties, until the dissolution destined by him comes upon his creatures. Everything perishes except his face, person. 727. 47. How a new dynasty originates. It should be known that when the ruling dynasty starts on the road to senility and destruction, the rise and beginning of the new dynasty takes place in two ways. The one way is, for provincial governors in the dynasty to gain control over remote regions when the dynasty loses its influence there. Each one of them founds a new dynasty for his people and a realm to be perpetuated in his family. His children or clients inherit it from him. Gradually, they have a flourishing realm. They often compete bitterly with each other and aspire to gain sole possession of it. The one who is stronger than his rival will gain the upper hand and take away what the other had. This happened in the Abbasid dynasty when it started on the road to senility and its shadow receded from the remote regions. The Samanids gained control over Transoxania, the Hamdanids over Mosul and Syria, and the Tulunids over Egypt. The same thing happened in the Umayyad dynasty in Spain. Their realm was divided among the Reyes de Taifas who had been their provincial governors. It was divided into several dynasties with several rulers, who passed their realms on after their death to their relatives or clients. This way of forming a new dynasty avoids the possibility of war between the new rulers and the ruling dynasty. These new rulers are already firmly established in their leadership and do not want to gain domination over the ruling dynasty. The latter is affected by senility, and its shadow recedes from the remote regions of the realm and can no longer reach them. The other way is for some rebel from among the neighboring nations and tribes to revolt against the dynasty. He either makes propaganda for some particular cause to which he intends to win the people, as we have indicated, 728, or he possesses great power and a great group feeling among his people. His power is already flourishing among them, and now he aspires with the help of his people to gain royal authority. His people are convinced that they will obtain it, because they feel that they are superior to the ruling dynasty, which is affected by senility. Thus, to the rebel and his people, it is a fact that they will gain domination over it. They constantly attack it, until they defeat it and inherit its power. This was the case with the Seljuks in relation to the descendants of Sebuktigin, and with the Marianides and the Maghrib in relation to the Almohads. God has the power to execute his commands. 729. 48. A new dynasty gains domination over the ruling dynasty through perseverance, and not through sudden action. We have, just, mentioned that new dynasties originate in two ways. The one way is for them to originate with the governors of outlying regions when the shadow of the ruling dynasty recedes from those regions and its waves are rolled back. As a rule, such governors do not attack the ruling dynasty, as we have mentioned before, because all they have to do is to be satisfied with what they already have. That is as far as their power goes. The other way is that of men who make propaganda for some cause and of rebels who rebel against the ruling dynasty. It is inevitable that they attack the ruling dynasty, because their power warrants such a course. They revolt only when they have a family with sufficient group feeling and strength to give them success. Indecisive battles take place between them and the ruling dynasty. Such battles are repeated and continued all the time, until by perseverance they achieve domination and victory. As a rule, they do not gain victory through sudden action. The reason for this is that victory in war, as we have mentioned before, 730 as a rule is the result of imaginary psychological factors. Numbers, weapons, and proper tactics may guarantee victory. However, as has been mentioned above, all these things are less effective than the imaginary, psychological factors, as has been mentioned above. Trickery is one of the most useful things employed in warfare. It is the thing most likely to bring victory. A tradition says, war is trickery. 731. Accepted custom has made obedience to the ruling dynasty a necessity and an obligation, as has been mentioned before in more than one place. 732. This puts many hindrances in the way of the founder of a new dynasty. It discourages his followers and supporters. His closest intimates may be fully intent upon obeying him and helping him. Still, others are more numerous, who are affected by weakness and laziness under the influence of the belief that they owe submission to the ruling dynasty. Their zeal slackens. Therefore, the founder of a new dynasty is hardly able to make a stand against the ruler of the ruling dynasty. Consequently, he falls back on patience and perseverance, until the senility of the ruling dynasty has become obvious. Then his people lose the belief that they owe submission to the ruling dynasty. They become sufficiently spirited to make an open attack upon the ruling dynasty in concert with the founder of the new dynasty. Victory and domination are the result. Furthermore, the ruling dynasty has many luxuries. The royal authority of the people of the ruling dynasty had been firmly established. They had enjoyed prosperity and pleasures. To the exclusion of others, they had appropriated a good deal of the revenues from taxes. Thus, they have many horses in their stables and good weapons. There is much royal pomp among them. Gifts from their rulers, given either voluntarily or under constraint, have been showered upon them. 733. With all this, they frighten their enemies. The people of the new dynasty do not have such things. They have the desert attitude and are poor and indigent. This leaves them unprepared for such things. What they hear about the conditions and excellent state of preparedness of the ruling dynasty makes them apprehensive. They are afraid to do battle against the ruling dynasty, on account of it. Therefore, their leader is forced to wait until senility takes hold of the ruling dynasty and its group feeling and fiscal structure are disintegrating. Then, the founder of the new dynasty seizes the opportunity to gain the upper hand, quite some time after his attack had begun. This is how God proceeds with his servants. The men of the new dynasty differ from the men of the ruling dynasty with regard to descent, customs, and all other things. They, persistent, attacks and their desire to gain the upper hand estrange the men of the new dynasty more and more from the men of the ruling dynasty. Consequently, the people of the two dynasties become thoroughly estranged from each other, inwardly and outwardly. No information about the men of the ruling dynasty, either secretly or openly, reaches the men of the new dynasty, such as might enable them to find some unpreparedness among them, because all connection and intercourse between the two dynasties has been cut off. They thus continue to exert pressure, 734, but, they are in a state of fear and shy away from sudden action. Eventually, God permits the ruling dynasty to end, its life to stop, and disintegration to afflict it from all sides. The senility and decay of the ruling dynasty, which had been concealed from the people of the new dynasty, now become clear to them. In the meantime, their strength has grown, because they had cut off and taken away districts and outlying regions from the ruling dynasty. Thus, they become spirited enough to attempt sudden action. The apprehensions that had hitherto weakened their resolution disappear. The long wait comes to an end, and sudden action finally brings domination. This may be exemplified by the emergence and beginnings of the Abbasid dynasty. They, Abbasid, Shia remained in Khorasan for 10 years or more after the Abbasid propaganda had consolidated and the Abbasids had gathered for attack. Then, their victory materialized, and they gained the upper hand over the Umayyads. The same was the case with the Alids, Zadis, in Tabaristan at the time their propaganda appeared among the Dalam. They had to wait a long time before they gained domination over that region. The Alid rule then ended, and the Dalam aspired to rule over Furs and the two Irigs. They waited, patiently, for many years, until they were able to cut off Isfahan and Furs, and take it for themselves. Then, they gained domination over the Caliph in Baghdad. The same was the case with the Ubaidid, Fatimids. Their missionary in the Maghrib, Abu Abdallah Hash-Shi'i, 735 stayed for more than 10 years among the Qudama Berbers waiting to gain victory over the Aqlabids in Ifriqiya. The Ubaidid Fatimids then took possession of the Maghrib, and, later on, aspired to become rulers of Egypt. They spent about 30 years waiting for their chance, constantly sending armies and fleets against Egypt. Support for Egypt's defense against the Ubaidid Fatimids came from Baghdad and Syria, by land and by sea. They took possession of Alexandria, the Fayyum, and Upper Egypt. Their propaganda progressed from there to the Hijaz and found a home in Mecca and Medina. Then, their general, Jahar al-Kitab, 736 moved against the capital city of Egypt with his armies and took possession of it. He uprooted the dynasty of the Banu Tughshar, Ikhshidids, and founded Cairo. His caliph, Ma'ad al-Mu'izz Ali, came to Cairo, and chose it as his residence. This was about 60 years after the Ubaidid Fatimids had, for the first time, gained domination over Alexandria. The same was the case with the Seljuk Turk rulers. They gained the upper hand over the Samayanids and went beyond Transoxania, but then they had to spend about 30 years waiting to gain the upper hand over the dynasty of Ibn Sebuktigin in Khorasan 737. After some time, they advanced against Baghdad and took possession of it and of the caliph there. The same was the case with the Tatars who succeeded the Seljuks. They came out of the steppe in 617 1220/21, but it took them 40 years thereafter to gain domination. The same was also the case with the inhabitants of the Maghrib. The Lamtuna Almoravids declared themselves against their Makrawa rulers. They waited for years to gain the upper hand over them. Then, the Almohads came forth with their propaganda against the Lamtuna. They spent about 30 years fighting them, until they gained domination over their capital in Marrakesh. The same was the case with the Zenata Marianides. They declared themselves against the Almohads and spent about 30 years waiting to gain possession of Fez. They cut off Fez and environs from the Almohad realm. Then, they spent another 30 years fighting the Almohads, until they gained domination over their capital in Marrakesh. All this is mentioned in the histories of these dynasties. A struggle of this sort, marked by constant attacks and long perseverance, is characteristic of the relationship between new and ruling dynasties. This is how God proceeds with his servants. And verily, you will not be able to change God's way. 738. The events of the Muslim conquests cannot be used as an argument against the preceding remarks. The Muslims gained the upper hand over the Persians and the Byzantines in the 3 or 4 years that followed the death of the Prophet, and there was no long waiting period. It should be realized that this was one of the miracles of our Prophet. The secret of it lay in the willingness of the Muslims to die in the holy war against their enemies because of their feeling that they had the right religious insight, 739, and in the corresponding 740 fear and defeatism that God put into the hearts of their enemies. All these miraculous facts broke through the known custom of a long wait, governing the relationship between new and ruling dynasties. Thus, the rapid conquest was one of the miracles of our Prophet. The fact of the appearance of such miracles in Islam is generally acknowledged. Miracles cannot be used as analogies for ordinary affairs and constitute no argument against them. 49. There is an abundant civilization, large population. At the end of dynasties, and pestilences and famines frequently occur then. In the previous discussion, 741, it has been established that, at the beginning, dynasties are inevitably kind in the exercise of their power and just in their administration. The reason is either their religion, when the dynasty is based upon religious propaganda, or their noble and benevolent attitude toward others, which is required by the desert attitude that is natural to dynasties, at the beginning. A 742 kind and benevolent rule serves as an incentive to the subjects and gives them energy for cultural activities. Civilization will be abundant, and procreation will be vigorous. All this takes place gradually. The effects will become noticeable after 1 or 2 generations at best. At the end of 2 generations, the dynasty approaches the limit of its natural life. 743. At that time, civilization has reached the limit of its abundance and growth. It should not be objected here that it was stated before 744 that in the later years of a dynasty, there will be coercion of the subjects and bad government. This is correct, but it does not contradict what we have just said. Even though coercion makes its appearance at that time and the revenues decrease, the destructive influences of this situation on civilization will become noticeable only after some time, because things in nature all have a gradual development. In the later years of dynasties, famines and pestilences become numerous. As far as famines are concerned, the reason is that most people at that time refrain from cultivating the soil. For, in the later years of dynasties, there occur attacks on property and tax revenue and, through customs duties, on trading. 745 or, trouble occurs as the result of the unrest of the subjects and the great number of rebels, who are provoked by the senility of the dynasty to rebel. Therefore, as a rule, little grain is stored. The grain and harvest situation is not always good and stable from year to year. The amount of rainfall in the world differs by nature. The rainfall may be strong or weak, little or much. Grain, fruits, and the amount of milk given by animals varies correspondingly. Still, for their food requirements, people put their trust in what it is possible to store. If nothing is stored, people must expect famines. The price of grain rises. Indigent people are unable to buy any and perish. If for some years nothing is stored, hunger will be general. The large number of pestilences has its reason in the large number of famines just mentioned. Or, it has its reason in the many disturbances that result from the disintegration of the dynasty. There is much unrest and bloodshed, and plagues occur. The principal reason for the latter is the corruption of the air, climate, through 2. Large a civilization, population. 746 It results from the putrefaction and the many evil moistures with which the air has contact in a dense civilization. Now, air nourishes the animal spirit 747 and is constantly with it. When it is corrupted, corruption affects the temper of the spirit. If the corruption is strong, the lung is afflicted with disease. This results in epidemics, which affect the lung in particular. Even if the corruption is not strong or great, putrefaction grows and multiplies under its influence, resulting in many fevers that affect the tempers, and the bodies become sick and perish. The reason for the growth of putrefaction and evil moistures is invariably a dense and abundant civilization such as exists in the later years of a dynasty. Such civilization is the result of the good government, the kindness, the safety, and the light taxation that existed at the beginning of the dynasty. This is obvious. Therefore, it has been clarified by Science 748 in the proper place that it is necessary to have empty spaces and waste regions interspersed between civilized areas. This makes circulation of the air possible. It removes the corruption and putrefaction affecting the air after contact with living beings, and brings healthy air. This also is the reason why pestilences occur much more frequently in densely settled cities than elsewhere, as, for instance, in Cairo in the east and Fez in the Maghrib. God determines whatever He wishes. 50. Human civilization requires political leadership for its organization. We have mentioned before in more than one place that human social organization is something necessary. It is the thing that is meant by the civilization which we have been discussing. People, in any social organization must have someone who exercises a restraining influence and rules them and to whom recourse may be had. His rule over them is sometimes based upon a divinely revealed religious law. They are obliged to submit to it in view of their belief in reward and punishment in the other world, things that were indicated, by the person who brought them, their religious law. Sometimes, his rule is based upon rational politics. People are obliged to submit to it in view of the reward they expect from the ruler after he has become acquainted with what is good for them. The first type of rule is useful for this world and for the other world, because the lawgiver knows the ultimate interest of the people and is concerned with the salvation of man in the other world. The second type of rule is useful only for this world. 749. We do not mean here that which is known as political utopianism, siyasa madaniyat. 750. By that, the philosophers mean the disposition of soul and character which each member of a social organization must have, if, eventually, people are completely to dispense with rulers. They call the social organization that fulfills these requirements the ideal city. The norms observed in this connection are called political utopias, siyasa madaniyat. They do not mean the kind of politics, siyasa, that the members of a social organization are led to adopt through laws for the common interest. That is something different. The ideal city, of the philosophers, is something rare and remote. They discuss it as a hypothesis. Now, the aforementioned rational politics may be of two types. The first type of rational politics may concern itself with the public interest in general, and with the ruler's interest in connection with the administration of his realm, in particular. This was the politics of the Persians. It is something related to philosophy. God made this type of politics superfluous for us in Islam at the time of the Caliphate. The religious laws take its place in connection with both general and special interests, for they also include the maxims of the philosophers, and the rules of royal authority. The second type, of rational politics, is the one concerned with the interest of the ruler and how he can maintain his rule through the forceful use of power. The general, public, interest is, here, secondary. This is the type of politics practiced by all rulers, whether they are Muslims or unbelievers. Muslim rulers, however, practice this type of politics in accordance with the requirements of the Muslim religious law, as much as they are able to. Therefore, the political norms here are a mixture of religious laws and ethical rules, norms that are natural in social organization together with a certain necessary concern for strength and group feeling. Examples to be followed in the practice of this kind of politics are, in the first place, the religious law, and then, the maxims of the philosophers and the way of life of rulers of the past. The best and most comprehensive written exposition of this subject is the Letter of Tahir b. al-Hussein, al-Ma'mun's general, to his son Abdallah b. Tahir when al-Ma'mun appointed him governor of Ar-Rakta, Egypt, and the intervening territories. On that occasion, his father Tahir wrote him the famous letter. In it, he exhorted him and gave him his advice concerning all religious and ethical matters. He discussed all important political problems as handled by the religious law and all problems of power politics that he would have to know in his government and administration. He urged him to strive for virtue and good qualities, in a manner so exemplary that no king or commoner can do without these exhortations. This is the text of the letter, as copied from At-Tabari's work, 751. In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate. And now, it is your duty to fear the one and only God, to be afraid of Him, to watch Him, to keep away from His wrath, and to guard your subjects night and day. With the help of the good health with which God has clothed you, apply yourself to thinking of your resurrection and the place where you will be going, as well as to the things that will be your concern and for which you will be held responsible. Also, apply yourself to working in that sense in such a way that on the day of resurrection, God will protect you and save you from His retribution and painful punishment. God has been benevolent to you. He has made it obligatory for you to show kindness to those of His servants whom He has made your subjects. He has made it your duty to be just to them, to see to it that His rights and punishments are observed in connection with them, to defend them and protect their families and women, to prevent bloodshed, to make their roads 752 safe, and to enable them to live in peace. God will punish you in connection with the duties He has placed upon you, if you do not take care of them properly. He will make them your concern and hold you responsible for them and reward you for the good deeds you have done or the evil deeds you have not done. Keep your mind, brain, and eye free for that. Let nothing draw your attention from it. It is your principal and crucial task. It is the first thing through which God will give you successful guidance. Let the first thing to which you apply yourself and on which you work, be unfailing fulfillment of the duty of the 5 daily prayers that God has imposed upon you. Let people come to you to pray together with you, and perform the prayers at the proper times, 753 with all their rites. That is, perform the ablutions before the prayers. Begin the prayers with the mention of God. Use the proper chant when you recite the Quran. Perform the requisite bows and prostrations and pronounce your profession of the faith properly. Let your intention in prayer be sincere in the presence of your Lord. Urge and instigate those who are with you and under your control to perform the prayers. Prayer, as God said in the Quran, restrains from sin and evil. 754. Then, let this be followed by adopting the ways of the Messenger of God, by constant application of his qualities, and by imitation of the pious ancient Muslims after him. If you have a task before you, let yourself be helped in doing it by asking God whether you should do it or not, by fearing Him, by applying what God has revealed in His book with regard to things to be done and things not to be done, the things that are permitted and the things that are forbidden. And by taking as your guide the directions contained in the traditions of the Messenger of God. Act, then, as you owe it to God to act. Do not be swayed from justice according to your likes and dislikes, either on behalf of a person close to you or on behalf of one remote from you. Favor jurisprudence and the jurists, the religion, Islam, and theologians, the book of God and those who live by it. For the best ornament of a man is judicial interpretation of the faith, search for it, admonition to others to follow it, and knowledge of how one can get close to God. Religion, Islam, is the leader and guide to everything that is good. It commands the doing of good and prohibits the committing of sins and crimes. Through religion, man's knowledge of God and respect for Him grows with God's help, and he will attain the highest rank in the other world. In addition, when people notice your religious attitude, they will have respect for your rule and reverence for your government. They will be friendly to you and trust in your justice. Be moderate in everything. There is nothing more clearly useful, safer, and in every way better, than moderation. Planned moderation calls for right guidance. Right guidance leads to success. Success leads to happiness. The preservation of Islam and of the model ways of the Prophet is accomplished through moderation. Give preference to it in all your worldly affairs. Do not fall behind in your pursuit of the other world. 755 Of good deeds, of kind behavior, of the right path. One cannot do enough pious deeds, if they are to help one to find God's face and satisfaction in the company of God's saints in His noble abode. You should know that planned moderation in worldly matters gives strength and protects against sins. You have nothing that is better than moderation, to guard your person and your rank. 756 And to try to improve your affairs. Therefore, use it and be guided by it. Then, your affairs will succeed. Your power will increase. Your private and public affairs will be in order. Have a good opinion of God, and your subjects will cause you no trouble. In all your affairs, try to get in touch with Him, and you will always enjoy His favor. Do not suspect anyone who works for you with regard to the work with which you have entrusted him, before you have discovered what is the matter with him. For it is a crime to suspect innocent persons and to have a bad opinion of them. Therefore, make it your duty to have a good opinion of the men around you. Drive away bad opinions of them, and do not harbor any such opinions. That will help you to gain their following and to train them. Do not let Satan, the enemy of God, gain entry to your affairs. Just a little weakness on your part is sufficient for him. He will cause you so much grief through your having a bad opinion of the men around you, that it will disturb the pleasure of your life. You should know that having a good opinion of others gives you strength and rest, and you will be competent to handle your affairs to your satisfaction. It will enable you to cause people to love you and to be straightforward in everything. Do not let your good opinion of the men around you and your kindness to your subjects prevent you from making inquiries, from investigating your affairs, from taking personal charge of the business of your officials, from protecting your subjects, or from looking. 757 After the things that sustain and benefit them. On the contrary, consider it your most important task to take personal charge of the affairs of your officials and to protect your subjects by looking after their needs and providing for their requirements. This, more than anything else, helps to preserve the religion of Islam, and gives life to the Sunnah of the Prophet. In all these things, have pure intentions. Pay special attention to improving yourself as a person, one who realizes that he will be held responsible for his deeds, that he will be rewarded for his good deeds, and punished for his evil deeds. For God made the religion a refuge and a power. He lifts up those who follow it and honor it. Therefore, lead those whom you govern and rule along the path of religion and the way of right guidance. 758 Apply the punishments that God has ordained for criminals, according to their station and according to what they deserve. Do not disregard it and do not make light of it. Do not postpone the punishment of those who must be punished. If you fall short in this respect, it will help spoil the good opinion people have of you. In this regard, let your actions be guided by the well-known traditions, Sunan. Keep away from innovations and doubts. Your religion will then be healthy and your manliness unimpaired. If you enter into an agreement, fulfill it. If you have promised to do a certain good deed, keep your promise. Accept favors and repay them. Close your eyes to the defects of those of your subjects who may have them. Refrain from lies and falsehoods. Despise liars and keep 759 away calumniators. Your affairs will begin to fail, so far as their effects both in this world and the other world are concerned, as soon as you give access to a liar or boldly use lies yourself. Lying is the beginning of crimes and falsehood, and calumny their end. The calumniator is not safe himself. No friend of a man who listens to calumny is safe. 760 Nothing works out well for a person who is governed by calumny. Love good and righteous people. Be honestly helpful to noble men. Be friendly to the weak. Keep in touch with your blood relatives. 761 Desire thus to see the face of God and to strengthen his cause, and wish, thus, for his reward in the other world. Keep away from evil desires and injustice. Pay them no notice and show your subjects that you are free of them. Be just in governing your subjects. Treat them honestly and with the kindness through which you will reach the path of right guidance. Control yourself and do not get angry. Prefer dignity and mildness. Beware of sharpness, levity, and deceitfulness in any enterprise you engage in. Beware of saying, I am in authority. I may do what I want to do. This soon reveals a lack of sense on your part and little certainty of the one and only God. Let your intention with regard to God, and your certainty of him be sincere. You should know that royal authority belongs to God. He gives it to whomever he wants to give it and takes it away from whomever he wants to take it away. 762. The change from divine favor to divine vengeance occurs nowhere faster than with men in authority who do not acknowledge 763 divine favors, and with people enjoying good positions in the government, who are ungrateful for the favors and benefactions of God and consider themselves superior beings because of the bounty that God has given them. Do not be greedy. Let the treasures and riches you gather and hoard up be piety, the fear of God, justice, the improvement of your subjects, the cultivation of their country, the supervision of their affairs, the protection of the mass of them. 764 and support of the unfortunates. You 765 should know that property, once it is gathered and stored in treasuries, does not bear fruit, but if it is invested in the welfare of the subjects and used for giving them what is due to them and to prevent them from need, then it grows and thrives. The common people prosper. The proper use of money is an ornament to high officials, and it means a time of prosperity. It brings strength and protection. Therefore, let it be your way of gathering up treasures to spend money on building up Islam and the Muslims. Distribute to the officials of the commander of the faithful who preceded you 766 that which is due them. Give your subjects their share. Pay attention to the things that might improve their situation and livelihood. If you do that, the divine favor will always be with you. You will make it obligatory for God to increase his favors to you. In this way, you will also be better able to levy the land tax and to collect the property of your subjects and your provinces. Because everybody experiences justice and kindness from you, everybody will be more amenable 767 to obeying you and more favorably disposed towards everything you want. Therefore, exert yourself in the way that I have outlined to you in this chapter. Be very much concerned 768 in this respect. Of all your money, there will remain only what was honestly spent in behalf of God 769. Acknowledge the gratefulness of those who express their thanks, and reward them for it. Beware of forgetting the terror of the other world on account of this world and its temptations, so that you become neglectful of your duties. Neglect causes shortcomings, and shortcomings cause ruin. Whatever you do, you should do for God and in God, and hope for a reward. God has poured His favors upon you in this world and showed you His bounty. Therefore, take refuge in giving thanks to God. Rely upon Him, and He will give you more good things and benefactions. God gives His reward according to the gratefulness of those who express their thanks, and the way of life of those who do good deeds. He bestows His favors and shows His grace where they are deserved. 770. Do not consider any sin lightly. Do not support an envious person. Do not pity a sinner. Do not be friendly with an ungrateful person. Do not connive with an enemy. Do not trust a calumniator. Do not rely upon a deceiver. Do not conclude a friendship with an immoral person. Do not follow a seducer. Do not praise a hypocrite. Have contempt for nobody. Do not refuse a poor petitioner. Do not try to improve a worthless person. Pay no attention to buffoons. Do not break a promise. Do not fear pride. 771. Show no anger. Do not be ostentatious. Do not walk arrogantly. Do not justify a stupidity. 772. Do not neglect your search for the other world. Do not waste your days in finding fault. Do not close your eyes to an evildoer, because you are afraid of him or because you have a prejudice in his favor. Do not seek the reward of the other world in this world. Consult frequently with jurists. Accustom yourself to being mild and prudent. Learn from men of experience and intelligence who are understanding and wise. Do not permit extravagant 773 or stingy people to give you advice. Do not listen to what they say, because the damage they can cause is greater than their usefulness. Nothing can ruin your projects on behalf of your subjects more quickly than avarice. You should realize that if you are greedy, you take much and give little. If you are this way, you will have little success, for your subjects will be willing to like you only if you keep away from their property and do not treat them unjustly. You will keep the sincere friendship of your friends. 774 by being generous to them and giving them fine gifts. Shun avarice. You should know that avarice is the first sin that man commits against his Lord and that the sinner is disgraced. Thus, God says in the Quran, those who are preserved from their own avarice are, indeed, generous. 775 Therefore, be really generous. 776 Give all the Muslims shares and portions in the booty you take. Be assured that generosity is one of the best things for a human being to practice. Make generosity one of your character qualities. Be really generous. Accept generosity as your constant practice. Supervise the registers and contracts of the soldiers. Augment their salaries. Give them a good livelihood, and God will thus remove their indigence. They will be a strong support for you, and their hearts will be readily and gladly willing to obey you and serve you. It is sufficient happiness for a man in authority that his soldiers and subjects find mercy in his justice, protection, fairness, attentiveness, kindness, piety, and largesse. Therefore, avoid the unpleasantness of one of the two alternatives. 777 by being conscious of the excellence of the other alternative and by always acting in accordance with it. Then, you will find success, well-being, and prosperity, if God wills. You should know that the office of judge holds a place with God to which nothing else compares. It is God's scales in which the conditions of men on earth are equalized. Making decisions. 778 and dispensing justice in judicial procedure and in all actions brings well-being to the subjects. The roads, then, are safe. The person who was treated unjustly finds justice. Everyone obtains his right. The livelihood of all is safeguarded. Proper obedience is paid. God gives good health and well-being. the religion can endure. The Sunnah and the religious laws function properly. Right and justice are applied in Judicial Procedure 779. As a judge, be firm in behalf of God. Abstain from corruption 780. Go and apply the legal punishments. Do not make haste. Stay away from anger and unrest. Be satisfied with an oath. Let your breath be calm and your cheek cool 781. Make use of your experience. Be attentive when you are silent, and precise when you speak. Treat the plaintiff fairly. Hesitate when there is a doubt. Have much evidence produced. Do not show prejudice in favor of any of your subjects. Do not give anyone preferred treatment. Do not expose yourself to censure. Be steadfast and slow. Observe. Look out. Reflect. Think things over. Consider them. Be humble in the presence of your Lord. Be kind to all your subjects. Let the truth govern you. Do not shed blood hastily, for God considers the unlawful and violent shedding of blood as something very grave. Consider the land tax. It maintains the subjects. Through it, God has strengthened and exalted Islam, helped and protected the Muslims, confounded and annoyed the enemies of Islam and the Muslims, and humbled and humiliated the unbelievers who are their subjects 782. Therefore, distribute the land tax among those to whom it belongs. And do it justly, fairly, equitably, and generally. Do not make a noble man, Sharif, pay less because of his nobility, or a rich man because of his wealth, or one of your secretaries, or one of your intimates and entourage. Do not ask for more than is tolerable. Do not charge anyone too much. Treat all the people justly. This makes it easier to gain their friendship and is more certain to achieve general satisfaction. You should know that by your appointment, you were made treasurer, guardian, and shepherd. The people under your jurisdiction are called subjects, Ra'iya flock, because you are their shepherd and overseer. Therefore, accept from them what they give you of their affluence, and use it for the administration of their affairs, for their welfare, and for providing for their needs. Employ for them understanding, skilled, and experienced men, who have theoretical knowledge of, and are able to act with, political wisdom and moderation. Give them good salaries. This is one of the duties incumbent upon you in connection with the task with which you have been entrusted. Let nothing divert your attention or distract you from it. When you give preference to this matter and take charge of it properly, you will cause an increase in the favors your Lord bestows upon you, and favorable comment on your activities. You will also gain through it the love of your subjects and promote the general welfare. The general well-being of your country will be improved. Cultural activity will expand in your region. The fertility of your districts will be evident. Your income from the land tax will be large. Your property will be extensive. You will have the attachment 783 of your soldiers and be able to satisfy everybody through generous gifts from you. Your political leadership will be praised. Your justice will be approved by the enemy. In all your affairs, you will be just, capable indeed, powerful, and well equipped 784. Therefore, strive for this goal. Do not give anything else preference over it. Then, the results of your rule will find praise, if God wills. Appoint a trusted official in every district under your jurisdiction, to inform you about your officials and to write you concerning their manner of life and activities. Thus, you will have eventually something like personal contact with every official in his area of jurisdiction and personally observe all his affairs. If you want to order your official to do something, consider what the result of the thing you want done will be. If you see that the result will be healthy and sound, and if you hope for a good return from it and good counsel 785 and benefit, send your order out. If not, refrain from any immediate action, and consult people of insight and knowledge about the matter. Then, prepare for action. A man often looks at something he wants to do and finds it to be as he desires. This pleases and deceives him. Failure to consider what the result may be, could be his ruin and destruction. Whatever you want to do it resolutely and address yourself to it forcefully after, having asked God's help. Always ask your Lord whether you should do a particular thing. Finish the work you have to do today and do not postpone it until tomorrow. Do much of it yourself. For every tomorrow has its own business and events that will keep you from doing the work you should have done today but postponed. You should know that when a day is gone, it is gone with all there was in it. If you postpone the work that you should have done yesterday, you will have to do 2 days' work today. That will be difficult for you and will eventually make you ill. On the other hand, if you do each day the work that you should do, you will give rest to your body and soul and discharge your tasks as ruler well. Consider the free, noble, people who are advanced in age and of whose sincere intentions you can be certain, and whose love for you, whose helpfulness as advisors, whose active interest in your affairs you have observed. Select them for your service and be benevolent toward them. Have regard for the descendants of great houses who have become needy. Provide for their requirements and improve their condition, so that indigents will no longer be able to touch them. Devote yourself to looking after the affairs of the poor and indigent, those who are not able to bring before you complaints about injustices they have suffered, 786 and other lowly persons who do not know that they may ask for their rights. Inquire about these people in all secrecy, and put good men from among your subjects in charge of them. Command them to report to you their needs and conditions, so that you will be able to look into the measures through which God might improve their affairs. Have regard also for people who have suffered accidents, and for their widows and orphans. Give them stipends from the treasury, following the example of the commander of the faithful, God give him power. In being kind to them and giving them presents, so that God may thereby improve their livelihood and give you a blessing and increased favors. Give the blind stipends from the treasury. Give to those of them who know the Quran and know most of it by heart a higher salary than to others. Set up houses for Muslims who are ill, to shelter them. Appoint attendants in these houses who will handle them kindly, and appoint physicians who will treat their diseases. Comply with their desires so long as it does not lead to waste in the treasury. You should know that when people are given their rights and when their dearest wishes are fulfilled, they are still not satisfied and are not quiet, but want to bring their needs to the attention of those in charge of them. Because they desire to receive more and to get additional kindnesses from them. Often, the person who looks after the affairs of the people is annoyed by the great number of matters referred to him, which occupy his thought and mind, and cause him embarrassment and difficulties. The person who desires justice, knowing what is good for him in this world and how excellent the reward in the other world will be, is not like the person who advances 787 toward the things that bring him close to God and who seeks God's mercy. Let people frequently come to see you and show them your face. Let not your guards hinder them. Be humble toward them. Show them your smiling countenance. Be lenient with them when you put questions and speak to them. Be benevolent to them in your generosity and bounty. If you give, do it kindly and pleasantly. Do it, for the sake of doing a good deed and of receiving the reward, for it in the other world. Do it without causing trouble, and do not remind the person to whom you give something of your gift, in the expectation of a gift in return. Such a gift will be a profitable transaction, if God wills. Learn from the affairs of the world that you are able to observe personally, and from the persons in authority and in positions of leadership who lived before your time in past centuries and among nations that disappeared. Then, in all your conditions, seek God's protection and love, act in accordance with His religious law and sunnah, and establish His religion and scripture. Keep away from the things that are different from that, or in opposition to it, and that provoke the wrath of God. Be acquainted with the property that your officials collect and use for their expenditures. Do not take any forbidden property, and do not be a wasteful spender. Sit down often with scholars and seek their advice and company. Let it be your desire to follow and establish the Sunnah of the Prophet, and to prefer noble and lofty character qualities. Consider those the most honorable of your protégés and intimates who, when they notice a fault in you, are not deterred by their respect for you from informing you about it in secret or from calling your attention to the shortcoming that lies in that fault. People of that sort are your most sincere friends and helpers. Look at those of your officials who are present at your residence, and at your secretaries. Appoint for each one of them a time of the day in which he may come to you with his documents and orders and, also present to you, the needs of your officials and the affairs of your districts and subjects with which he is concerned. Lend your ear and your eye, your mind and your intellect, to the things of that sort which he presents to you. Go over it again and think it over. If it is reasonable and appears effective, order it to be done and ask God about it. If not, have it checked and investigated. Do not remind your subjects or anyone else to whom you show a favor, of it, in the expectation of a gift. Accept from no one anything except faithfulness, straightforwardness, and support for the affairs of the Muslims. Do not do any favors for anyone except under these conditions. Understand this letter of mine that I am addressing to you. Study it carefully and always act in accordance with it. Ask God for help in all your affairs. Ask Him whether or not you should do a thing. God is with goodness and with good people. Let your most important activity and greatest desire be what is pleasing to God and means order in His religion, might and steadfastness in His people, and justice and welfare in the Muslim group and the protected religions. I am asking God to give you help and success and right guidance and shelter. Farewell. The historians report that people liked the letter when it appeared, and it found wide circulation. Al-Ma'mun heard about it. When it had been read to him, he said, Abu Tayyib, that is, Tahir did not omit any of the matters that concern this world, the religion, administration, the formation of opinion, politics, the improvement of the realm and the subjects, the preservation of the government, obedience to the caliphs, and maintenance of the caliphate. He has dealt very well with all these matters, and has given directions how to handle them. Al-Ma'mun then ordered the letter to be sent to all officials in the various regions, so that they might use it as a model and act accordingly. This is the best treatment of this type of politics that I have found. God inspires whomever of His servants He wants to inspire. 51. The Fatimid. The opinions of the people about him. The truth about the matter. It has been well known, and generally accepted, by all Muslims in every epoch, that at the end of time a man from the family of the Prophet will without fail make his appearance, one who will strengthen the religion and make justice triumph. The Muslims will follow him, and he will gain domination over the Muslim realm. He will be called the Mahdi. Following him, the Antichrist will appear, together with all the subsequent signs of the hour, the day of judgment, as established in the sound tradition of the Sahih. After the Mahdi, Isa, Jesus, will descend and kill the Antichrist. Or, Jesus will descend together with the Mahdi, and help him kill the Antichrist, and have him as the leader in his prayers. Evidence for this matter has been found in the traditions that religious leaders have published. They have been, critically, discussed by those who disapprove of the matter, and have often been refuted by means of certain other traditions. 788. The more recent Sufis have another theory and a sort of argument concerning the Fatimid. They like to base themselves upon the removal of the veil, kashf, which is the basis of their various mystical paths. We are now going to mention here the various traditions concerning this matter. We are also going to mention the attacks upon these traditions by those who disapprove of the matter, and the evidence upon which they base their disapproval. This, then, will be followed by a report on the statements and opinions of the Sufis. Thus, the true situation will become clear, if God wills. We say, a number of religious leaders have published traditions concerning the Mahdi, among them at-Tirmidhi, 789 Abu Dawud, 790 Al-Bazar, 791 Ibn Majah. 792 Al-Hakim, 793 At-Tabarani, 794 and Abu Yala al-Mawzil 795. They mention a number of the men around Muhammad as transmitters of these traditions: Ali, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Talha, Ibn Mas'udi. 796 Abu Huraira, Anas, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, 797 Hababa, 798 Salima, 799 Thaban, 800 Qurabi. Lias, 801 Ali al-Hilali, 802 and Abdallah b. Al-Harith b. Jaz 803 among others. They also mention their chains of transmitters, which have often been found objectionable by those who disapprove of the matter. We shall mention this now, because hadith scholars acknowledge negative criticism to have precedence over positive criticism. If we find that some person in the chain of transmitters is accused of negligence, poor memory, weakness, or poor judgment, it affects and weakens the soundness of the tradition. It should not be said that the same faults often affect the persons mentioned as authorities in the two Sahihs. The general consensus of hadith transmitters confirms the soundness of the contents of the two Sahihs, as presented by al-Bukhari and Muslim. The uninterrupted general consensus in Islam also confirms the acceptability of the two Sahihs, and the necessity of acting in accordance with their contents. General consensus is the best protection and defense. Works other than the two Sahihs are not on the same level with them in this respect. How we have to proceed in discussing the transmitters mentioned in the two Sahihs is indicated in the statements of authoritative hadith scholars on that subject. As-Suhaili 804 reports with reference to Abu Bakr b. Abi Khathama 805 that the latter did a thorough job of collecting the traditions of the Mahdi. As-Suhaili said, the tradition with the strangest chain of transmitters is the one mentioned by Abu Bakr al-Iskaf 806 in the Fawaid al-Akbar. It goes back to Malik b. Anas, who had it on the authority of Muhammad b. al-Munkadir, 807 who had it on the authority of Jabir, 808 who said that the Messenger of God said, "He who does not believe in the Mahdi is an unbeliever, and he who does not believe in the Antichrist is a liar." He said something similar with regard to the rising of the sun in the west. I think one could not find a more extremist statement. The soundness of his chain of transmitters between Abu Bakr and Malik b. Anas, also, is problematic. Abu Bakr al-Iskaf is considered by hadith scholars as suspect and as a forger of traditions. With their chain of transmitters going back to Ibn Mas'udi, At-Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud have published the following tradition through Asim b. Abi Najid, 809 one of the seven authoritative Quran readers, on the authority of Zair b. Habash, 810 on the authority of Abdallah b. Masud, on the authority of the Prophet. If no more than 1 day remained of the world, said Zaida 811, God would cause that day to last until there be sent a man from me, or from my family whose name will tally with my name, and the name of whose father will tally with the name of my father. This is the recension of Abu Dawud. Abu Dawud did not add any remarks critical of it, and he said in his well-known epistle 812 that everything to which he did not append critical remarks in his book was all right. The recension of At-Tirmidhi has, "The world will not be destroyed until the Arabs shall be ruled by a man from my family, whose name will tally with my name." Another recension has, "Until a man from my family takes charge." He, At-Tirmidhi, states in connection with both recensions that it is a good and sound tradition. He also transmitted the tradition through Asim, with a chain of transmitters that stops with Abu Huraira. Al-Hakim said that the tradition was transmitted by Athori, 813. Shuba, 814 Zaida, and other Muslim religious leaders, on the authority of Asim. He said, everything transmitted by Asim, on the authority of Zair, on the authority of Abdallah, is sound, according to the rules I have laid down for using information derived from Asim as evidence, for he is an authoritative Muslim religious leader. However, 815 Ahmad b. Hanbal said about Asim that he was a pious man, a reader of the Quran, and a good and reliable person, but that Al-Amash 816 had a better memory than he. Shubha used to prefer Al-Amash to him for establishing the soundness of traditions. Al-Ajli 817 said, there was some difference of opinion about his reliability, with regard to Zair and Abu Wa'il. 818 In this way, he alluded to the weakness of the material he transmitted on their authority. Muhammad b. Sad said, he was reliable, however, he made many errors in his traditions. 819 Yaqub b. Sufyan 820 said, there is some confusion in his traditions. Abd Arman b. Abi Haytham 821 said, I said to my father, 822 Abu Zura 823 says that Asim is reliable. My father replied, he does not fall into that category. Ibn Ulayya 824 discussed Asim, adversely, and said, everyone named Asim has a bad memory. Abu Haytham said, so far as I am concerned, he falls into the category of truthful transmitters whose traditions are all right. But he was not a great hadith expert. 825 and Nasa'i 826 expressed a different opinion about him. Ibn Kirish 827 said, his traditions contain things that are unknown. Abu Ja'far al-Ghali 828 said, there was nothing the matter with him except a bad memory. Ad-Daraqutni 829 said, there was something the matter with his memory. Yahya al-Qattan 830 said, I have never found a man named Asim who did not have a bad memory. He further said, I heard Shubha say, we were told by Asim b. Abin Najid, reporting the identical tradition. Adh Tahabi 831 said, he is reliable in his reading of the Quran, but not quite reliable in his traditions. He is a truthful person who commits errors in judgment. He is good in his traditions. Were someone to argue that Al-Bukhari and Muslim published traditions of his, we should reply that they published them when there were also other authorities for the same tradition, and that they did not use him as their basic authority. And God knows better. Abu Dawud published a tradition relating to all in the chapter on the Mahdi, as transmitted by Fitr b. Khalifa, 832 on the authority of Al-Qasim b. Abi Baza, 833 on the authority of Abu Tufail, 834 on the authority of Ali, on the authority of the Prophet, who said, if only one day of the whole duration of the world remained, God would send a man of my family who will fill the world with justice, as it had been filled with injustice. 835. Fitr b. Khalifa was considered reliable by Ahmad b. Hanbal, Yahya b. Al-Qattan, Ibn Ma'in, 836 and Nasa'i, and others, but Al-Ajli said, he is good in his traditions, but he has some pro-Shia bias. Ibn Ma'in once said, he is a reliable person and a Shia. Ahmad b. Abdallah b. Yunus 837 said, we used to go and see Fitr, but he is rejected, and we did not write down traditions on his authority. Another time, he said, I used to go and see him but always left him like a dog. Ad-Daraqutni said, he is not utilized as evidence. Abu Bakr b. Aish 838 said, I gave up transmitting traditions on his authority only because of his bad dogmatic opinions. Al-Jazajani 839 said, he is wayward and not reliable. End of the quotation. With a chain of transmitters going back to Ali, Abu Dawud also published the following tradition, on the authority of Harun b. Al-Mughira, 840 on the authority of Amr b. Abiqais, 841 on the authority of Shu'aib b. Khalid, 842 on the authority of Abu Ishaq as-Sabi'i, 843 who said that all, looking at his son al-Hasan, said, "This son of mine is a lord," as he was called by the messenger of God. From his spine, there will come forth a man who will be called by the name of your prophet and who will resemble him physically, but will not resemble him in character. He then mentioned the story, he will fill the earth with justice. Harun said, 844 we were told by Amr Abiqas, on the authority of Mutarif b. Tarif, 845 on the authority of Abu 1 Hassan 846 on the authority of Hilal b. Amr, 847 I heard Ali say, the Prophet said, a man will come forth from beyond the river, Transoxania, whose name will be Al-Harith b. Larath. In his avant-garde, there will be a man whose name will be Mansur. He will pave the way, or, prepare the way, for the family of Muhammad, as the Quraysh prepared the way for the Messenger of God. Every believer must help him or, he said, respond to his call. Abu Dayyad made no critical remarks about this tradition. In another passage, he said, Harun is a Shia. As Sulaymani 848 said, he is disputed. Concerning Amr Abiqas, Abu Dayyad said, there is nothing wrong with him, but his traditions contain errors. Adh Tahabi said, he is trustworthy, but there are doubts concerning him. As to Abu Ishaq as-Sabi'i, even though traditions on his authority are published in the two Sahihs, it is well established that he became confused at the end of his life. His transmission on the authority of Ali is not continuous. The same applies to Abu Dayyad's transmission on the authority of Harun b. al-Mughira. Abul Hasan and Hilal b. Amr, mentioned, in the second chain of transmitters, are little known. Abul Hasan is known only from the fact that Mutarif b. Tarif transmits material on his authority. End of the quotation. The following tradition, furthermore, was published by Abu Dayyad, as well as by Ibn Majah and Al-Hakim in the Mustadrak, through Ali b. Nufail, 849 on the authority of Said b. Al-Muzayyib, on the authority of Salima, who said, I heard the Messenger of God say, the Mahdi is one of my family, one of the descendants of Fatima. This is Abu Daw6D's recension. He did not make any critical remarks concerning it. Ibn Majah's recension has, the Mahdi is one of Fatima's descendants. Al-Hakim's recension has, I heard the Messenger of God mention the Mahdi. He said, yes, he is a fact, and he will be one of the children of Fatima. Neither Hakim, nor anyone else discussed the soundness of the tradition, critically. Abu Ja'far al-Ughali declared it to be weak. He said, Ali b. Nufail has not been followed in this tradition, and it is known only through him. Abu Dayyad also published the following tradition of Salima, which was transmitted by Abul Khalil Salah, 850 on the authority of one of his colleagues, on the authority of Salima, on the authority of the Prophet, who said, there will be a difference of opinion at the death of a caliph. A man from Medina will leave and flee to Mecca. People from Mecca will come to him and will drive him out. 851 He will be unwilling. They will render the oath of allegiance to him between the corner, Run, of the Kanzaspa and the Maqam Ibrahim. A mission will be sent to him from Syria. He will disappear with them into the desert between Mecca and Medina. When the people see that, the saints 852 from Syria will come to him, and groups of Iraqis, and they will render the oath of allegiance to him. Then, a man from the Quraysh will arise, whose maternal uncles are from the Kalb. He will send a military mission to them, and it will defeat them. This is the mission of the Kalb. No success will come to those who did not witness the seizing of booty by the Kalb. He will distribute the money and act among the people according to the sunnah of their prophet. He will plant Islam firmly upon earth. He will last 7 years. Then, he will die, and the Muslims will pray for him. Abu Dayyad said. Someone said on the authority of Hisham, 853 9 years. Others said, 7 years. Abu Dayyad also transmitted the same tradition according to Abul Khalal's recension, on the authority of Abdallah b. al-Harith, 854 on the authority of Salima. This clears up the identity of the transmitter, whose name was not mentioned in the first chain of transmitters. The persons in it are persons mentioned in the two Sahihs. One could not attack them or find fault with them. The tradition, furthermore, is stated, by Abu Dayyad, to have been transmitted by Qatada 855 on the authority of Abul Khalal. Qatada did not actually hear the traditions he transmits, from his authorities. He says, on the authority of, but does not say, I heard from. In cases of transmitters about whom there is doubt whether they actually heard their traditions from their authorities, a tradition is accepted only when it expressly states that they actually heard it. In this case, moreover, the tradition does not expressly state that it is concerned with the Mahdi, although Abu Dayyad did, it is true, mention it in his chapters dealing with the Mahdi. Abu Dayyad, followed by al-Hakim, also published the following tradition of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri through Imran al-Qattan, 856 on the authority of Qatada, on the authority of Abu Nadra, 857 on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who said, the Messenger of God said, the Mahdi is from me. He has a bald forehead and an aquiline nose. He will fill the earth with equity and justice, as it had been filled with injustice and crime. He will rule 7 years. This is Abu Dayyad's recension. He did not make any remarks critical of it. Al-Hakim's recension has, the Mahdi is from us, the people of the house. He has a well-formed, aquiline nose, and a bald forehead. He will fill the earth with equity and justice, as it had been filled with injustice and crime. He will live this long, and he opened out his left hand and 2 fingers of his right hand, the thumb and index finger, bending, the other, 3 down. Al-Hakim said, this is a sound tradition, according to the rules laid down by Muslim, for sound traditions, but neither, al-Bukhari nor Muslim, published it. End of the quotation. Scholars differ as to whether Imran al-Qattan can be used as evidence. Al-Bukhari published traditions of his only as additional evidence, and not as the sole basis. Yahya al-Qattan used not to transmit any traditions on his authority. Yahya b. Main said, he is not strong. Once he said, he is nothing. Ahmad b. Hanbal said, I hope that he is sound in his traditions. Yazid b. Zuray 858 said, he was a Kharijite and considered it permissible to put the people of the Qibla 859 to the sword. An-Nasa'i said, he is weak. Abu Ubaid al-Ajuri 860 said, I asked Abu Dayyad about him. And he replied that he was a transmitter of good traditions and that he had heard only good things about him. Another time, I heard him mention him and say that he was weak. In the days of Ibrahim b. Abdallah b. Hassan, 861 he gave an unfortunate legal opinion that led to bloodshed. At Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and al-Hakim published the following tradition of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri through Zayd al-Ami, 862 on the authority of Abu Siddiq an-Naji, 863 on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who said, we feared that something might happen after our Prophet had died. Therefore we asked him, and he said, in my nation, there will come forth the Mahdi. He will live 5, or 7, or 9 increasing the number, as if in doubt. He said, we asked what the numbers meant. He replied, years. Then he continued, someone will come to the Mahdi and say to him, O Mahdi, give me something. He said, and, the Mahdi, will pour into his garment as much as he can carry. This is the recension of At-Tirmidhi, who said, it is a good tradition. It was transmitted in more than one way, on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, on the authority of the Prophet. The recension of Ibn Majah and Al-Hakim has, there will be in my nation the Mahdi. If he lives, among you, a short time, it will be 7 years, if not, it will be 9. My nation will experience a prosperity the like of which they have never experienced before. The earth will bring forth its food and will not hoard any of it. There will be piles of money. A man will get up and say, O Mahdi, give me something, and he will reply, just take. 864. Ad-Daraqutni, Ahmad b. Hanbal, and Yahya b. Main said that Zayd al-Ami was all right. Ahmad added that he was superior to Yazid ar-Rakashi 865 and Fadl b. Isa 866. However, Abu Haytham said concerning him that he was weak, and that his traditions may be written down but not used as evidence. Yahya b. Main said of him in connection with another tradition, he is nothing. He once also said, his traditions may be written down, but he is weak. Al-Juzajani said, he is just holding on, mutamasik. Abu Zur'a said, he is not strong, his traditions are futile. And he is weak. Abu Haytham said, he is not such a good man. 867 Shuba transmitted traditions on his authority. An-Nasa'i said, he is weak. Ibn Adi 868 said, most of his traditions and authorities are weak, even though Shuba transmitted traditions on his authority. Shuba possibly did not transmit traditions on the authority of anyone weaker than he. It has been said that At-Tirmidhi's tradition is an interpretation of Jabir's, and Abu Sa'id's traditions, which are transmitted by Muslim in the Sahih 969. Jabir said, the Messenger of God said, at the end of my nation, there will be a caliph who will not count money, but just throw it around. Abu Sa'id's tradition reads, among your caliphs a caliph who will throw the money around. As transmitted by another chain of transmitters, the tradition on the authority of Jabir and Abu Sa'id reads, at the end of time, there will be a caliph who will distribute money without counting it. End of the quotation. Muslims' traditions do not mention the Mahdi, and there is nothing in them to show that the Mahdi is meant in them. Another tradition was transmitted by Al-Hakim through Awf al-Arabi, 870 on the authority of Abu Siddiq an-Naji, on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who said, the Messenger of God said, the hour will not arise before the earth is filled with injustice, crime, and transgression. Then there will come forth from my family one who will fill it with equity and justice, as it had been filled with crime and transgression. Al-Hakim said with regard to this tradition, it is sound according to the conditions, for the soundness of traditions, laid down by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, though none of them published it. The following tradition, furthermore, was transmitted by Al-Hakim through Sulaiman b. Abid, 871 on the authority of Abu Siddiq an-Naji, on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the Messenger of God said, at the end of my nation, there will come forth the Mahdi. God will give him spring rain to drink, and the earth will sprout forth its plants. He will give money away in fairness. 872 The cattle will become numerous, and the nation will be great. He will live 7, or 8 that is, seasons. Al-Hakim said with regard to this tradition, that it is a sound one as far as its chain of transmitters is concerned, though neither Al-Bukhari nor Muslim published it. Also, none of the authors of the 6 authoritative collections of traditions published a tradition of Sulaiman b. Abid. However, Ibn Hibban 873 mentioned him in the Thiqat, on reliable transmitters. We have seen nobody who discussed him adversely. This tradition was also transmitted by Al-Hakim through Asad b. Musa, 874 on the authority of Hamid b. Salama, 875 on the authority of Matar al-Warraq. 876 and Abu Harun al-Abdi, 877 on the authority of Abu Siddiq an-Naji, on the authority of Abu Sa'id, as follows, the Messenger of God said, the hour will not arise before the earth is filled with injustice, crime, and transgression. The following tradition, furthermore, was transmitted by Al-Hakim through Sulaiman b. Abid, 871 on the authority of Abu Siddiq an-Naji, on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the Messenger of God said, at the end of my nation, there will come forth the Mahdi. God will give money away in fairness. 872 The cattle will become numerous, and the the earth will be filled with injustice and crime, and there will come forth a man from my family. He will rule 7 or 9, and the earth will be filled with justice and equity, as it had been filled with injustice and crime. Al-Hakim said with regard to this tradition, that it was sound according to the conditions, for the soundness of traditions, laid down by Muslim. He mentioned Muslim because he published traditions on the authority of Hamad b. Salama and his sheikh, Matar al-Warraq. He published no traditions on the authority of Hamad's other sheikh, Abu Harun al-Abdi. Abu Harun is very weak and suspected of lying. There is no need to present in detail the opinions of the religious leaders who consider Abu Harun weak. Asad b. Musa, who transmits the tradition on the authority of Hamad b. Salama, is called the Lion, Asad, of the Sunnah. Al-Bukhari said that he is known, favorably, with regard to the traditions he transmits. 878 He used him to support the reliability of traditions in his Sahih. Abu Dawud and An-Nasa'i used him as evidence. However, An-Nasa'i said on another occasion, he is reliable, but it would have been better for him if he had not become an author. Abu Muhammad b. Hazm 879 said regarding him, he is not known, favorably, with regard to the traditions he transmits. The tradition was also transmitted by At-Tabarani in his medium Mujam, as transmitted by Abul Wasil Abd al-Hamid b. Wasil, 880 on the authority of Abu S-Siddiq an-Naji, on the authority of Al-Hasan b. Yazid as Sad, 881 one of the Banu Badala, on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, who said, I heard the Messenger of God say, there will come forth a man from my nation who will talk according to my sunnah. God will send upon him rain from heaven, and the earth will sprout forth for him its blessing. The earth will be filled through him with equity and justice, as it has been filled with injustice and crime. He will direct the affairs of this nation for 7 years, and he will settle in Jerusalem. At-Tabarani said concerning this tradition, it was transmitted by a number of persons on the authority of Abu S-Siddiq. None of them inserted another transmitter between him and Abu Sa'id, except Abu Wasil. He transmitted it on the authority of Al-Hasan b. Yazid, on the authority of Abu Sa'id. End of the quotation. This Al-Hasan b. Yazid was mentioned by Ibn Abi Haytham, 881a, who has no more information on him than that chain of transmitters, in which he appears as a transmitter on the authority of Abu Sa'id, and in which Abu S-Siddiq appears as a transmitter on his authority. In the Mizan, Adh Tahabi said that he was little known but was mentioned by Ibn Hibban in the Thiqat, on reliable transmitters, 882 No tradition of Abul Wasil, who functions as transmitter of this tradition, on the authority of Abu S-Siddiq, was published by any of the 6 authors of authoritative collections of traditions. He was mentioned by Ibn Hibban in the Thiqat, on reliable transmitters, in the 2nd class. Ibn Hibban said regarding him, he transmitted traditions on the authority of Anas, and Shuba and Attab b. Bashir 883 transmitted traditions on his authority. In his Kitab as-Sunan, Ibn Majah published the following tradition of Abdallah b. Masud through Yazid b. Abi Ziyad, 884 on the authority of Ibrahim, 885 on the authority of Al-Gama, 886 on the authority of Abdallah, who said, while we were with the Messenger of God, there came some Hashemite youths. When he saw them, tears welled forth from his eyes and his color changed. He said, I said, for some time now we have observed something in your face we do not like. He answered, for us, the people of the house, God has chosen the other world instead of this one. After me, my people will experience misfortune, exile, and banishment, until people shall come from the east with black flags. They will ask for goodness but they will not be given it. They will fight and they will be victorious. And they will be given what they had asked for, but they will not accept it. Eventually, they will hand the earth over to a man of my family. He will fill it with equity, as they had filled it with injustice. Those among you who live to see that happen shall go to them, even if it is necessary to creep over the snow. End of the quotation. The hadith transmitters know this tradition as the tradition of the flags. Its transmitter is Yazid b. Abi Ziyad. Shubha said regarding him, he was a person who traced back to Muhammad traditions that are not known to have been transmitted with a chain of transmitters going back to him. Muhammad b. Fudail. 887 said, he is one of the great religious leaders of the Shia. Ahmad b. Hanbal said, he was no hadith expert. Once he said, he is not such a good man. Yahya b. Main said, he is weak. Al-Ajli said, his traditions are permissible. At the end, he used to understand things. Abu Zura 888 said, he is soft. 889 his traditions may be written down, but they cannot be used as evidence. Abu Haytham said, he is not strong. Al-Juzajant said, I heard them declare his traditions weak. Abu Dawud said, I do not know anyone who omitted his traditions, but I like others better than him. Ibn Adi said, he belongs to the Shia of Al-Khilfa. In spite of his weakness, his traditions may be written down. 890 Muslim transmitted traditions of his, but only when the same traditions were also transmitted with other chains of transmitters. In general, the majority considered him weak. Religious leaders have pronounced openly on the weakness of the tradition of the flags that was transmitted by him on the authority of Ibrahim, on the authority of Al-Qama, on the authority of Abdallah. Waqi b. Al-Jara 891 said regarding it, it is nothing. The same was said by Ahmad b. Hanbal. Abu Qudama 892 said, I heard Abu Usama 893 say, regarding Yazid's tradition about the flags on the authority of Ibrahim, were he to swear me 50 oaths, I should not believe him. Is that Ibrahim's way? Is that Al-Qama's way? Is that Abdallah's way? The Duaft, on weak transmitters. Adh Tahabi said, it is not sound. 894. The following tradition of Ali was published by Ibn Majah, as transmitted by Yasin al-Ajli, 895 on the authority of Ibrahim b. Muhammad b. Al-Hanafiyat, 896 on the authority of Ibrahim's father, on the authority of his grandfather, Ali, who said, the Messenger of God said, the Mahdi is from among us, the people of the house. God will give him success in one night. Although Ibn Ma'in said, regarding Yasin al-Ajli, that there was nothing wrong with him, al-Bukhari said that he was disputed. 897 in al-Bukhari's terminology, that is a strong expression for declaring a transmitter weak. The tradition of Yasin was quoted by Ibn Adi in the Kamil and by Adh Tahablu in the Mizan, with disapproval. Adh Tahabi said, it is known as his tradition. 898. The following tradition of Ali was published by At-Tabarani in his medium Mujam. Al said to the Messenger of God, will the Mahdi be from among us or from among other people, O Messenger of God? Muhammad replied, indeed, he will be from among us. Through us, God will bring about the end, as he brought about the beginning. Through us, they shall be saved from polytheism, and through us, God shall unite them after open hostilities, as he united them through us after the hostilities of polytheism. Ali said, will they be believers or unbelievers? Muhammad replied, rebel, s, and unbeliever, s. End of the quotation. The chain of transmitters of this tradition includes Abdallah b. Lahia 899. He is weak, and it is well known what the matter is with him. The same chain also includes Amr b. Jabir al-Hadrami 900. He is even weaker than Ibn Lahia. Ahmad b. Hanbal said, he, Amr b. Jabir, transmitted disapproved things on the authority of Jabir 901. I have heard that he used to lie. An-Nasa'i said, he is not reliable. Ibn Lahia said, he was a stupid, weak-minded sheikh. He used to say, Ali is in the clouds. He was sitting with us, and when he saw a cloud, he would say, there goes Ali passing by in a cloud. 902. Another tradition of Ali was also published by At-Tabarani. The Messenger of God said, at the end of time, there will be a rebellion in which people will be caught as firmly as gold is embedded in the ore. Do not slander the Syrians, but only the bad ones among them, because among them there are, also, saints. 903. Soon a downpour will be sent from heaven upon the Syrians. It will divide them so much that if nothing, stronger, than foxes were going to fight them, they would be defeated. At that time, there will come forth one from among my family, and there will be with him 3 flags, regiments, comprising, according to the highest figure given, 15,000 men, or, according to the lowest figure, 12,000 men. Their order of the day will be, kill, kill. They will encounter 7 flags, regiments, each of which will be commanded by a man who seeks royal authority. But God will kill all of them. He will restore to the Muslims their unity, prosperity, remote possessions, and judgment. End of the quotation. The chain of transmitters of that tradition includes Abdallah b. Lahia. He is weak, and it is well known what the matter is with him. The tradition was transmitted by Al-Hakim in his Mustadrak. He said, it is sound with regard to the chain of transmitters, but Al-Bukhari and Muslim did not publish it. Al-Hakim's recension has. Then, there will appear the Hashemite, and God will restore to the people their unity, etc. Ai Hakim's chain of transmitters does not include Ibn Lahia. It is, as he states, a sound chain. The following tradition of Ali was published by Al-Hakim in the Mustadrak, as transmitted by Abu Tufail, on the authority of Muhammad b. Al-Hanafiyyah, who said, we were with Ali, and someone asked him about the Mahdi. Ali replied, look here. Then he made a 7 with his fingers and said, he is the one who will come forth at the end of time. When someone says, at that time, God, God, he will be killed. God will gather for him people who are scattered like stray clouds. He will unite them. They will be neither sad nor glad over anyone who joins them. In number they will be like the fighters at Badr, whom men of former times did not surpass and men of later times fell short of. They will also be like the number of the companions of Saul who crossed the river with him. 904. Abu Tufail said, Ibn al-Hanafiyyah said, do you want to hear it? I said, yes. So, he continued, he will come forth between these 2 mountains. 905. I said, by God, I shall assuredly not leave them until I die. And he died in it, that is, Mecca. Al-Hakim said, this is a sound tradition according to the conditions, for sound traditions, laid down by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. End of the quotation. However, it is sound only according to the conditions laid down by Muslim, for in the chain of transmitters, there occur the names of Amr ad-Duni 906 and Yunus b. Abi Ishaq 907. Al-Bukhari did not publish any traditions of these 2 men. It also includes Amr b. Muhammad al-Anghazi 908. Al-Bukhari did not publish traditions of his as evidence, though he did publish them to support the reliability of traditions. In addition, there also is the pro-Shla sentiment of Amr ad-Duni. Although Ahmad b. Hanbal, Ibn Ma'in, Abu Haytham, and Nasa'i, and others considered him reliable, Ali b. al-Madani 909 said on the authority of Sufyan. 910 that Bishr b. Marwan 911 had disqualified him. In what respect? Sufyan asked. He replied, in respect to his pro-Shia sentiment. The following tradition of Anas b. Malik was published by Ibn Majah, as transmitted by Sad b. Abd al-Hamid b. Gafar, 912 on the authority of Ali b. Ziyad al-Yamami, 913 on the authority of Ikrimah b. Amr, 914 on the authority of Ishaq b. Abdallah, 915 on the authority of Anas, who said, I heard the Messenger of God say, we, the descendants of Abd al-Muttalib, are the lords of the inhabitants of paradise. I, Hamza, Ali, Jafar, al-Hassan, al-Hussein, and the Mahdi. 916 End of the quotation. Muslim published traditions of Ikrimah b. Amr, but only where the same tradition is reported by others. Some scholars considered him weak, others reliable. Abu Haytham ar-Raza said, he transmits traditions from authorities without stating whether he actually heard them from them. His traditions are acceptable only if he expressly states that he heard them. 916a. In the Mizan, Adh-Tahabi said with regard to Ali b. Ziyad, it is not known who he is. Then, he said, it should be Abdallah b. Ziyad. 917 Sadb. Abd al-Hamid was considered reliable by Yaqub b. Shayba. 918 Yahya b. Main said regarding him, there is nothing wrong with him. However, Athori discussed him, adversely, because, it is said, he saw him give legal opinions on certain problems and make mistakes. Ibn Hibban said, he belongs among those who made atrocious mistakes. He may not be used as evidence. Ahmad b. Hanbal said, Sadb. Abd al-Hamid claims that he heard the books of Malik when they were presented. The scholars disapprove of this statement of his. He is here in Baghdad and never made the pilgrimage, so how could he have heard them? Adh-Tahabi placed him among those whom it would be no slander to discuss, adversely. The following tradition was published by al-Hakim in his Mustadrak, as transmitted by Mujahid 919 on the authority of Ibn Abbas, with the chain of transmitters stopping with the latter and not continued back to the Prophet. Mujahid said, Abdallah b. Abbas said to me, if I had not heard that you are like a member of the family of Muhammad, I would not tell this tradition. He said, Mujahid replied, I shall keep it in confidence. I shall not tell it to anyone to whom you might object. Thereupon, Ibn Abbas said, from among us, the people of the house, there will be 4, as-Safa, al-Mundhir, al-Mansur, and the Mahdi. He said, Mujahid asked him to explain those 4 to him. And Ibn Abbas replied, as-Safa often kills his supporters and forgives his enemies. Al-Mundhir, I believe he said, will give away a great deal of money. He will not consider himself a great man and will hold on to, even, his smallest rights. Al-Mansur will be given half as much help against his enemies as the Messenger of God was given. Muhammad's enemies were terrified by him for a space of 2 months, 920, and Al-Mansur's enemies will be terrified by him for a space of 1 month. The Mahdi will be the one who will fill the earth with justice, as it had been filled with injustice. The cattle will be safe from wild animals, and the earth will cast out the treasures of its interior. He said, and I asked him what the treasures of the interior of the earth were. He replied, something like gold and silver columns. End of the quotation. Al-Hakim said, this is a sound tradition as regards the chain of transmitters. But neither Al-Bukhari nor Muslim published it. It is transmitted by Ismail b. Ibrahim b. Muhajir, 921 on the authority of his father. Ismail is weak, and his father Ibrahim is considered weak by most scholars, even though Muslim published traditions of his. The following tradition by Thaban was published by Ibn Majah. Thaban said, the Messenger of God said, 3 will fight with each other at the place where your treasure is. All of them are the sons of a caliph. None of them will get it. Then, black flags will arise from the east. They will kill you in a slaughter such as there has never been before. He then mentioned something that I do not remember. He continued, when you see him, render the oath of allegiance to him, even if you must creep over the snow. For he is the representative of God, the Mahdi. End of the quotation. The persons named in the chain of transmitters of this tradition are persons whose names occur in the Sahih. 922. However, among them is that of Abu Kilaba al-Jarmi 923 ADH Tahabi, and others mentioned that Abu Kilaba reported traditions he had not himself heard from his authorities. The chain of transmitters also includes Sufyan ath-Thawri. He is known for reporting traditions he had not heard from his authorities. Each of the two merely said that he had a tradition on the authority of such and such a person, without stating that he had heard it from him. Therefore, their traditions are not acceptable. The chain of transmitters further includes Abdar Razak b. Hammam, 924, who is known for his pro-Shia sentiments. At the end of his life he became blind and confused. Ibn Adi said, he reported traditions on the virtues of Muhammad and the early Muslims, with regard to which no one agrees with him. Scholars considered him to have pro-Shia sentiments. End of the quotation. The following tradition of Abdallah b. al-Harith b. Jaz Aziz Ubaidi was published by Ibn Majah through Ibn Lahiya, on the authority of Abu Zura Amr b. Jabir al-Hadrami, on the authority of Abdallah b. al-Harith b. Jaz, who said, the Messenger of God said, people will come forth from the east. They will pave the way for the Mahdi, that is, for his rule. At-Tabarani said, Ibn Lahiya stands alone with this tradition. We mentioned earlier, in connection with the tradition of Ali, published by At-Tabarani in his Medium Mujam, that Ibn Lahiya was weak and that his authority, Amr b. Jabir, was even weaker than he. 925. The following tradition was published by al-Bazir in his Musnad and by At-Tabarani in his Medium Mujam. The recension quoted here is that of At-Tabarani, the authority of Abu Huraira, on the authority of the Prophet, who said, in my nation, there will be the Mahdi. If he lives among you only a short time, it will be 7, 8, or 9. My nation will experience a prosperity the like of which it has never experienced before. The heavens will rain upon them. The earth will not hoard any of its plants. There will be piles of money. A man will get up and say, "Oh, Mahdi, give me something," and the Mahdi will reply, "Just take." 926. At-Tabarani and al-Bazir said, Muhammad b. Marwan al-Ajli 927 stands alone with this tradition. Al-Bazir added, we do not know whether anyone followed him in this tradition. Abu Dawud, as well as Ibn Hibban, by the way he mentions him in the Thagud, on reliable transmitters, considered him reliable. Yahya b. Ma'in said regarding him, he is all right. Once, he said, there is nothing wrong with him. Still, opinions about him differ. Abu Zura said, in my opinion, he is not such a good man. Abdallah b. Ahmad b. Hanbal 928 said, I saw Muhammad b. Marwan al-Ughali tell traditions while I was present. I did not write them down. I purposely omitted to do so. One of our colleagues wrote down traditions on his authority, in a way that suggested he considered him weak. The following tradition of Abu Huraira was published by Abu Ya'la al-Mawzili in his Musnad. Abu Huraira said, my friend Abul Qasim, the Prophet Muhammad, said, the hour will not arise before there shall have come forth against them a man from my family. He will beat them until they return to the truth. He said. And I asked, how long will he rule? He replied, 5 and 2. He said. And I asked, what is meant by 5 and 2? He replied, I do not know. End of the quotation. The chain of transmitters includes Bashir b. Nahik 929. Abu Haytham said, regarding him, he may not be used as evidence. Still, both al-Bukhari and Muslim used him as evidence, and the scholars considered him reliable. They paid no attention to Abu Haytham's statement that he may not be used as evidence. However, the chain of transmitters also includes Muraja b. Raja al-Yashkuri 930. Opinions differ concerning him. Abu Zur'a said, he is reliable. Yahya b. Main said, he is weak. Abu Dayyad said, he is weak, but once he said, he is all right. Al-Bukhari has one fragment 931 of his in his Sahih 932. The following tradition of Qurra b. Iyaz was published by Abu Bakr al-Bazar in his Musnad, and by At-Tabarani in his large and medium Mujams 933. Qurra said, the Messenger of God said, the earth will be filled with injustice and crime. When it is filled with injustice and crime, God will send a man from me whose name will be my name, and whose father's name will be my father's name. He will fill it with justice and equity, as it had been filled with injustice and crime. Heaven will not withhold its rain, nor the earth its plants. He will remain among you 7, or 8, or 9, that is, years. The chain of transmitters of that tradition includes Dayyad b. al-Muhabir b. Qadim, 934 on the authority of his father. Both Dayyad and his father are very weak. The 935 following tradition of Habiba was published by At-Tabarani in his medium Mujam. Habiba said, I heard the Messenger of God say, people will come forth from the east. They will come for a man who is at the house. They will eventually come into a desert land, and he will then disappear with them. Those who are left behind will join them. They will suffer the same fate. 936 I said, O Messenger of God, how about those who were sent against their will? He replied, they will suffer the same fate as the people have suffered. Then, God will resurrect each man according to the intention that had guided him in his actions. End of the quotation. The chain of transmitters of that tradition includes Salama b. al-Abrash, 937 who is weak. It also includes Muhammad b. Ishaq 938 he transmits traditions he did not hear, and he says that he had them on the authority of someone. His traditions are acceptable only where he expressly states that he heard them. The following tradition of Abdallah b. Umar was, also, published by At-Tabarani in his medium Mujam. Ibn Umar said, the Messenger of God was in the company of some Meccan emigrants and Medinese helpers, Ansar. Al-B. Abi Talib was on his left, and Al-Abbas on his right. Al-Abbas got into a dispute with one of the Ansar, and the latter used insulting language to Al-Abbas. Thereupon, the Prophet took the hand of Al-Abbas and the hand of Ali and said, the spine of this one will produce descendants until the whole earth shall be filled with injustice and crime. And the spine of that one will produce descendants until the whole earth shall be filled with equity and justice. When you see this happen, then take care of the Tamimite youth. He will advance from the east. He will be in charge of the flag of the Mahdi. End of the quotation. The chain of transmitters of this tradition includes Abdallah b. Umar al-Umari 939 and Abdallah b. Lahiya. Both are weak. The following tradition of Talha b. Ubaidillah, on the authority of the Prophet, was published by At-Tabarani in the medium Mujam. The Prophet said, there will be a rebellion. When one side rests, the other side will become restless. Finally, a herald will call from heaven, your commander is such and such. End of the quotation. The chain of transmitters of that tradition includes Al-Muthana b. as Sabah, 940, who is very weak. The tradition does not expressly mention the Mahdi, but scholars have included it in their chapters dealing with the Mahdi, and in his biography, by association. These are all the traditions published by the religious authorities concerning the Mahdi and his appearance at the end of time. One has seen what they are like. Very few. 941 are above criticism. Those who disapprove of the Mahdi matter frequently keep to the tradition of Muhammad b. Khalid al-Janadi, 942, on the authority of Ibn b. Salah b. Abi Aish, 943, on the authority of al-Hasan al-Basri, 944, on the authority of Anas b. Malik, on the authority of the Prophet, who said, "There is no Mahdi except Jesus, the son of Mary." Yahya b. Ma'in said, regarding Muhammad b. Khalid al-Janadi, that he was reliable. Al-Bayhaqi 945 said, Muhammad b. Khalid stands alone with this tradition. Al-Hakim said, regarding Muhammad b. Khalid, that he was a little-known personage. There are differences in the chain of transmitters of this tradition. Sometimes it is transmitted as quoted. In this form, it is attributed to Muhammad b. Idris ash-Shafi'el. Sometimes the tradition is transmitted on the authority of Muhammad b. Khalid, on the authority of Ibn, on the authority of al-Hasan, on the authority of the Prophet, thus skipping one link in the chain. Al-Bayhaqi says, thus, the tradition is one transmitted by Muhammad b. Khalid, who is little known, on the authority of Ibn b. Abi Aish, who is not accepted, on the authority of al-Hasan, on the authority of the Prophet, which makes it a tradition with an interrupted chain of transmitters. In general, the tradition is weak and disturbed. It has also been said that the statement, "There is no Mahdi except Jesus," means that nobody spoke in the cradle, Mahd, except Jesus. 946. This interpretation is intended to prevent use of the tradition as evidence for Mahdism, or its combination with the other traditions that speak about the Mahdi. 947. It is refuted by the story of Jurayy 948 and similar miracles, which show that Jesus was not the only infant to speak in the cradle. Sufi opinions about the Mahdi. The ancient Sufis did not go into anything concerned with the Mahdi. All they discussed was their mystic activity and exertion and the resulting ecstatic experiences and states. It was the Imamiyya and the extremist Shia who discussed the preferred status of Ali, the matter of his imamate, the claim made in his behalf to have received the imamate through the last will of the Prophet, 949, and the rejection of the two sheikhs, Abu Bakr and Umar. As we have mentioned in connection with the discussion of Shia dogmatics 950 thereafter, there originated among them the dogma of the infallible Imam 951. Much was written on Shia dogmatics. The Ismailiyya Shia made its appearance. It asserted the divinity of the Imam through incarnation. Others asserted that the dead Imams would return, either through metempsychosis or in the very form they had had during their lifetime. Still others expected the coming of Imams who would be cut off from them through death. Others, finally, expected that the family of Muhammad would return to power. They deduced this from the aforementioned traditions concerning the Mahdi, and from other traditions. Among the later Sufis, removal of the veil, kashf, and matters beyond the veil of sense perception likewise came to be discussed. A great many Sufis came to speak about incarnation and oneness. 951a. This gave them something in common with the Imamiyya and the extremist Shia who believed in the divinity of the Imams and in the incarnation of the deity in them. The Sufis also came to believe in a pole, Qutb, and in saints, Abdul. This belief looked like an imitation of the opinions of the extremist Shia concerning the Imam and the Alid chiefs. Muqaddimah 952. The Sufis thus became saturated with Shia theories. Shia theories entered so deeply into their religious ideas that they based their practice of using a cloak, kurga, on the alleged fact that all clothed al-Hasan al-Basri in such a cloak and caused him to agree solemnly that he would adhere to the mystic path. The tradition thus inaugurated by Ali, was continued, according to the Sufis, through al-Janawid, 953, one of the Sufi sheikhs. However, it is not known with certainty that Ali did any such thing. The mystic path was not reserved to Ali, but all the men around Muhammad were models of the various paths of religion. The fact that the Sufis restrict precedence in mysticism to all smells strongly of pro-Shia sentiment. This and other aforementioned Sufi ideas show that the Sufis have adopted pro-Shia sentiments and have become enmeshed in them. Therefore, the books of the extremist Ismailiyah, Shia, and the books of the later Sufis are full of ideas concerning the expected Fatimid. They were passed on through dictation and teaching. All these speculations are built upon brittle foundations. This applies to both parties. Some Sufis and Shia occasionally base themselves in this connection on astrological discussions of astral conjunctions. The result is a sort of predictions, maldham, as will be discussed in the following chapter. Most prominent among the later Sufis who discuss the Fatimid are Ibn al-Arabi al-Haytami, 954 in the Anka Maghrib, Ibn Qasi, 955 in the Kitab al-Analain, Abd al-Hagbi. Sabn, 956 and one of Ibn Sabn's pupils, Ibn Abi Wadil, 957 in his commentary on the Kitab al-Analain. When they speak about the Fatimid, they mostly speak in riddles and parables. Occasionally, they make a minimum of explicit statements, or their commentators make explicit statements. According to Ibn Abi Wadil, the sum of their beliefs in connection with the Fatimid is that, in pre-Islamic times, there had been error and blindness. Then, truth and right guidance made their appearance through prophecy. Prophecy was followed by the Caliphate, and the Caliphate, in turn, was followed by royal authority. Royal authority, then, reverted to tyranny, presumptuousness, and worthlessness. They said, and since it has been observed to be God's procedure to have things return to their original state, prophecy and truth will by necessity be revived through sainthood, wilaya. Sainthood will be followed by the stage that properly comes after it, caliphate. This, in turn, will be followed by the time of the Antichrist, Dajjal, which will take the place of royal authority and the rule of power. Then, unbelief will return to the old position it occupied before the coming of the prophecy of Muhammad. This refers to the caliphate which came after the prophecy, and to the royal authority which followed the caliphate. These are three stages. Likewise, the sainthood of the Fatimid, who will revive prophecy and righteousness, the stage, caliphate, that properly follows upon the Fatimid, and then the time of the Antichrist, which will follow after it, and which is that state of worthlessness alluded to in the expression appearance of the Antichrist. These are three stages corresponding to the first three. Then, unbelief will return to the existence it had had before the prophecy of Muhammad. Now, the caliphate, they continued, belongs legally to the Quraysh, according to the general consensus which cannot be weakened by the disapproval of people who have insufficient knowledge. 958 Therefore, the imamate belongs, of necessity, to a person who is even closer to the Prophet than the Quraysh. This he may be, either externally, by being a descendant of Abd al-Muttalib, or inwardly, by belonging to Muhammad's family, according to the real meaning of family, which means those at the time of whose presence the one who is their family is not absent. 959. In his Kitab Anka Maghrib, Ibn al-Arabi al-Haytami called the Mahdi, the seal of the saints. 960 He is known under the name of the silver brick, with reference to a tradition reported by al-Bukhari in the chapter on the seal of the prophets, in the book on Mandkib, which says, Muhammad said, I and the prophets before me are like a man who built a house and finished it save for one brick still to be placed. I am this brick. 961 Therefore, the scholars interpret the seal of the prophets 962 as the brick needed for the completion of the building. It means the prophet who has obtained the perfect prophecy. Sainthood in its different degrees is compared, by the Sufis, to prophecy. The perfect saint is considered to be the seal of the saints, that is, the saint who is in the possession of the rank that is the final, sealing, stage of sainthood. Exactly as the seal of the prophets was the prophet who was in possession of the rank that is the final, sealing, stage of prophecy. In the tradition quoted, the lawgiver, Muhammad, used the phrase, the brick, that completes, the house, for that final stage. The two things correspond to each other. Thus, they may be compared, to bricks, of different materials. In the case of prophecy, the brick is gold. In the case of sainthood, the brick is silver. The difference in importance existing between the two stages corresponds to the difference, in value, that exists between gold and silver. Gold brick is used as a name for the prophet, and silver brick as a name for the expected Fatimid saint. The one is the seal of the prophets, and the other the seal of the saints. Ibn al-Arab 963 said, as reported by Ibn Abi Wadil, this expected Imam is a member of the family of Muhammad and a descendant of Fatima. His appearance will take place when khfj years have passed after the Hijrah. He wrote down 3 letters. He meant their numerical value, 964 kh being 600, f80, and j3. This makes 683 years, or the end of the 7th-13th century. When this time had passed and, the Mahdi, had not appeared, some of those who accepted the tradition were forced to assume that the number meant the date of the birth of, the Mahdi, appearance meaning birth, and that he would come forth in 710-1310. He would be the Imam who would come forth from the region of the Maghrib. He said, if, as Ibn al-Arabi thinks, his birth is in the year 683-1284/85, he must be 26 years old at the time of his appearance. He said, they, also, thought that the Antichrist would come forth in the year 743-1342-43965 of the Muhammadan day. In their opinion, the Muhammadan day begins with the day of the death of the Prophet and lasts to the completion of the year 1000. In his commentary on the Kitab Quran Lane, Ibn Abi Wadil said, the expected saint who will take charge of God's command, who is referred to under the names of Muhammad al-Mahdi and seal of the saints, he is no prophet. He is a saint, sent by his spirit and his friend. Muhammad said, the scholar is among his people what the prophet is in his nation. He also said, the scholars of my nation are like the prophets of the children of Israel. The glad tidings of his coming will never cease to be heard, from the beginning of the Muhammadan day to shortly before the year 511-06/7, which is the middle of that day. They will become stronger and more numerous as the result of the Sheikh's jubilant announcements of the approach of the Mahdi's coming and the coming of his period, from the end of the year 500 onward. Al-Kindi, 966 he continued, mentioned that saint will be the person who will say the noon prayer with the people. He will renew Islam and cause justice to triumph. He will conquer the Spanish peninsula and reach Rome and conquer it. He will travel to the east and conquer it. He will conquer Constantinople, and rule over the whole earth will be his. The Muslims will become strong, Islam will be exalted, and the pristine religion, Din al-Hanafiyah, will come forth. From noon prayer to afternoon prayer, will be, 1, prayer time. Muhammad said, the time, between the two is a, prayer, time. 967. Al-Kindi also said, the sum total of the numerical value of the Arabic letters that have no diacritical points, he means, the letters at the beginning of certain surahs of the Quran 968 is 743 anti-Christian years. Then, Jesus will descend at the time of the afternoon prayer. The world will be prosperous. The sheep will go with the wolf. After they, non-Arabs, have become Muslims with Jesus, the non-Arab kingdom will last 160 years in all, that is, the sum of the letters, Q, Y, N. 40 of these 160 years will be the rule of justice. Ibn Abi Wadil said, Muhammad's statement, "There is no Mahdi except Jesus," means that there is no one who is guided, Mahdi, as well as Jesus. It has also been said, to mean that, nobody spoke in the cradle except Jesus. This interpretation, however, is refuted by the story of Jurayy and other stories. 969. It has been mentioned in the sound tradition of the Sahih that Muhammad said, "This Muslim state will not cease to be until the hour arises, or until the Muslims have been ruled by 12 caliphs," that is, from the Quraysh 970. The facts suggest that some of them were at the beginning of Islam, and that some of them will be at its end. Muhammad said, "The caliphate after me will last for 30, 971 or 31, or 36, years. It ends with the caliphate of Al-Hasan and the beginning of the caliphate of Muawiyah." The beginning of the rule of Muawiyah is a caliphate only according to the original meaning of the word. He is the sixth of the caliphs. The seventh caliph is Umar b. Abd al-Aziz. The remaining 5, of the 12 caliphs mentioned in the tradition, are 5 of Ali's descendants, members of Muhammad's family. This is supported by Muhammad's statement, "You are the possessor of its 2 periods, Qarn, meaning, the 2 periods of the nation, the beginning and the end." That is, you, Ali, are the caliph at its beginning, and your descendants will be caliphs at its end. The tradition is often used as evidence by those who believe in the return of conditions. 972. The first to return is the person to whom they refer in connection with the rising of the sun from the west. 973. Muhammad said, "When the emperor of the Persians has perished, there will be no Persian emperor after him, and when the Byzantine emperor has perished, there will be no Byzantine emperor after him. By God, I assure you, the treasures of both of them will be spent in God's behalf." Umar b. al-Khattab spent the treasure of the Persian emperor in behalf of God. He who will destroy the Byzantine emperor and will spend his treasures in God's behalf will be the expected Mahdi, when he conquers Constantinople. The ruler of Constantinople will be an excellent one, and the army that will conquer Constantinople will be an excellent one. 974. This was said by Muhammad. And the duration of his rule will be a few years. A few means between 3 and 9, or up to 10. 40 is also mentioned. In some recensions, it is 70. 40 refers to the length of the period of the Mahdi, and of the period of the 4 remaining caliphs of his family who will be in charge of his affairs after him, all of them be blessed. He continued, the astrologers mentioned that the duration of his rule and that of the members of his family after him will be 159 years. The form of government will thus be a caliphate and a rule of justice for 40 or 70 years. Then conditions will change, and the form of government will be royal authority. End of the quotation from Ibn Abi Wadil. In another passage, he said, "The final descent of Jesus will be at the time of the afternoon prayer, when 3/4 of the Muhammadan day have passed." He said, Yaqub b. Ishaq al-Kindi stated in the Kitab al-Jafar 975, in which he mentioned the conjunctions, when the conjunction reaches Aries at the beginning of DH 976, that is, in the year 698 1298/99 of the Hijra, the Messiah will descend. He will rule the earth as it pleases God. 977. He continued, it has been stated in the tradition that Jesus will descend at the white minaret east of Damascus. He will descend between two yellowish-colored ones, that is, two light saffron yellow-colored garments. 978. He will place his hands upon the wings of two angels. His hair is as long as though he had just been released from a dungeon. When he lowers his head, it rains, and when he lifts it up, jewels resembling pearls pour down from him. He has many moles on his face. Another tradition has, square built and reddish white. Still another has, he will marry in the garb, the word, garb meaning bucket as used by Bedouins. 979. Thus, the meaning is that he will take a woman from among the Bedouins as his wife. She will bear his children. The tradition also mentions that Jesus will die after 40 years. It is also said that Jesus will die in Medina and be buried at the site of Umar b. al-Khattab. And it is said that Abu Bakr and Umar will rise from the dead between two prophets, Muhammad and Jesus. Ibn Abi Wadil continued, the Shia say that he is the Messiah, the chief Messiah from the family of Muhammad. Some of the Shia referred to him the tradition, there is no Mahdi except Jesus. That is, there will be no Mahdi except the Mahdi whose relationship to the Muhammadan religious law is like the relationship of Jesus to the Mosaic religious law, in that he follows it and does not abrogate it. There are many similar such statements. The time, the man, and the place are clearly indicated in them. But the predicted time passes, and there is no slightest trace of the prediction coming true. Then, some new suggestion is adopted which, as one can see, is based upon linguistic equivocations, imaginary ideas, and astrological judgments. The life of every one of those people is spent on such things. Most of our contemporary Sufis refer to the expected appearance of a man who will renew the Muslim law and the ordinances of the truth. They assume that his appearance will take place at some time near our own period. Some of them say that he will be one of the descendants of Fatima. Others speak about him, only, in general terms. We have heard that from a number of them. The greatest of these Sufis is Abu Yaqub al-Badisi, the chief saint of the Maghrib. He lived at the beginning of the 8th–14th century. His grandson, our colleague, Abu Zakaria Yahya, told me that on the authority of his father Abu Muhammad Abdallah, on the authority of his father, the mentioned Saint Abu Yaqub 980. This is all we have read or heard about such discussions by those Sufis and all the information Hadith scholars relate concerning the Mahdi. As much as it has been in our power, we have presented the material exhaustively. The truth one must know is that no religious or political propaganda can be successful, unless power and group feeling exist to support the religious and political aspirations and to defend them against those who reject them, until God's will with regard to them materializes. We have established this before, with natural arguments which we presented to the reader 981. The group feeling of the Fatimids and the Talibids, indeed, that of all the Quraysh, has everywhere disappeared. There are other nations, whose group feeling has gained the upper hand over that of the Quraysh. The only exception is a remnant of the Talibids Hassanids, Husainids, and Ja'farites 982, in the Hijaz, in Mecca, Al-Yanbu, and Medina. They are spread over these regions and dominate them. They are Bedouin groups. They are settled and rule in different places and hold divergent opinions. They number several thousands. If it is correct that a Mahdi is to appear, there is only one way for his propaganda to make its appearance. He must be one of them, and God must unite them in the intention to follow him, until he gathers enough strength and group feeling to gain success for his cause and to move the people to support him. Any other way, such as a Fatimid who would make propaganda for the cause of the Mahdi, among people anywhere at all, without the support of group feeling and power, by merely relying on his relationship to the family of Muhammad, will not be feasible or successful. For the sound reasons that we have mentioned previously. The common people, the stupid mass, who make claims with respect to the Mahdi and who are not guided in this connection by any intelligence or helped by any knowledge, assume that the Mahdi may appear in a variety of circumstances and places. They follow blindly the well-known traditions about the appearance of a Fatimid. They do not understand the real meaning of the matter, as we have explained it. They mostly assume that the appearance will take place in some remote province and at the limits of civilization, such as the Zab in Afriqiya or as Sus in the Maghrib. There are many people of weak intelligence who journey to a monastery, Rabat, at Masa 983 near as Sus. They assume that they will be able to meet him there, thinking that he will appear at that monastery and that the oath of allegiance will be rendered to him there. Also, that monastery is close to the veiled Gudala, and they believe that the Mahdi will be one of them, or that they will be in charge of his propaganda. This is a conjecture that has no basis except the fact that these nations are strange ones and too remote, for others, to have a definite knowledge of their numbers and their weakness or strength. Also, the regions where they live are out of the reach of the ruling dynasties and outside of their authority. Therefore, people firmly imagine that the Mahdi will appear there, since these regions are not under the control of ruling dynasties and out of the reach of law and force. They have nothing else to go on except that. Many weak-minded people, therefore, go to that place, Rabat Masa, in order to support a deceptive cause that the human soul in its delusion and stupidity leads them to believe capable of succeeding. Many of them have been killed. Our Sheikh, Muhammad b. Ibrahim al-Abili, told me that at the beginning of the 8th–14th century, during the reign of Sultan Yusuf b. Yaqub 984, a man who practiced Sufism came forth in the Rabat Masa. He was known as At-Tawaziri, a gentilic formation from Tozir, Tf Zar, in the diminutive form. He claimed to be the expected Fatimid. Many of the Zainaga 985 and Guzfila inhabitants of Sus followed him. His power grew and was about to flourish. The Mazmuda chiefs feared that he might become dangerous to their rule. Therefore, as Saksawi hired someone who killed him in his home, at night, and his power dissolved. 986. Likewise, in the last decade of the 7th–13th century, a man who had the name Al-Abbas appeared among the Gumara. He claimed to be the Fatimid. He gained followers among the great mass of the Gumara. He entered Badis by force and burned down the business section of the city. Then, he travelled to the place Al-Mazama. There, he was killed by deceit, and thus failed to achieve his purpose. 987. There are many things of the sort. Our aforementioned sheikh told me a strange story of this type. On his pilgrimage to Mecca, upon leaving the monastery of the worshippers, Rabat al-Abad, 988, which is the burial place of Sheikh Abu Madian on the mountain overlooking Tlemcen, he met a man from Kerbala who belonged to the family of Muhammad. He had many followers and was held in high esteem. He also had many pupils and servants. The sheikh said, people from his native town paid for his expenses in most countries. He said, further, we became good friends on the road, and it became clear to me what the matter was with that man and his people. They had come from their home at Kerbala on behalf of the Fatimid business and in order to make propaganda for the Fatimid in the Maghrib. But when the man observed the Marinid dynasty, whose ruler Yusuf b. Yaqub was at that time laying siege to Tlemcen 989, he said to the men around him, "Go back, for we have fallen victim to an error. This is not our time." 990. This statement, coming from that man, shows that he realized that power can materialize only with the help of a group feeling equaling that of the people in power at the time. When he realized that he was a stranger without power in the Maghrib, and that none of the inhabitants of the Maghrib at the time was able to resist the group feeling of the Marianides, he gave up, admitted his error, and did not pursue his ambitions. It still remained for him to realize that the group feeling of the Fatimids and all the Quraysh had disappeared, especially in the Maghrib. However, his bias in favor of his cause did not permit him to realize this. God knows, and you do not know. 991. In recent times there has been a movement among the Arab population of the Maghrib to make propaganda for the truth and for living by the Sunnah, but which does not make propaganda for the Fatimid or anybody else. At times, a few individuals have aimed at re-establishing the Sunnah and changing reprehensible ways. Such individuals occupy themselves with this purpose, and gain many followers. They are mostly concerned with the improvement of the safety of the roads, since most of the corruption of the Bedouins has something to do with that, on account of the way Bedouins make their livelihood. As we have mentioned before 992, these individuals consider it their task to change reprehensible ways, among the Bedouins, through improving the safety of the roads as much as possible. However, the religious coloring cannot be firmly established in the Arabs. For them, repentance and return to the religion merely mean refraining from raids and robberies. That is the only thing they understand by repentance and becoming religious. Raids and robberies were the sins they committed before they repented, and these were the things of which they repented. Therefore, those who follow the new religious propaganda and live, as they think, by the Sunnah, are not deeply immersed in the different ways of seeking and following religious models. Their religion is merely abstinence from robbery and injustice and from making the roads unsafe. Beyond that, they continue most eagerly to search for worldly goods and for ways of making a living. There is a great difference between looking for religious ethics and searching for worldly goods. It is impossible that the two things could go together. No religious coloring can establish a hold over such people, and they cannot completely keep away from worthlessness. Reformers cannot ever become numerous. The chief differs from his followers in that religion and saintliness are firmly established in him. If he perishes, their rule dissolves, and their group feeling disappears. This happened in the 7th–13th century in Ifriqiya to a man of the Banat Kanzasbi of the Sulaim, by name Qasim b. Mari 993b. Ahmed. Later on, it happened to another man, of the Riyah Bedouins, who belonged to one of the sub-tribes of the Riyah, known as the Muslim. His name was Sa'ida. He was more religious and devoted than the former, Qasim. In spite of that, his followers were not successful, for the reasons mentioned. We shall mention these events in their proper places in connection with the discussion of the Sulaim and Riyah. 994. After that, there appeared other people to make such religious propaganda. They adopted similarly deceptive ideas. They followed the Sunnah in name only, but did not live by it, except for a very few. Neither they nor any of their successors had any success. This is how God proceeds with his servants.